Chapter 12:11. Thinking of this, looking at his great-grandson's corpse, he didn't have the courage to go forward and question him. The pressure of this supreme being made him tremble from the bottom of his heart. Lin Yu's aura passed through. Chen Shishir woke up. Her head felt dizzy. Lin Yu picked up the wine cup and threw it into the hands of the Zhao family's patriarch. With the Zhao family's patriarch's realm, he could see the problem in the wine cup at a glance. It was Zhao Qian who drugged her. The Zhao family's patriarch analyzed the reason at a glance. If that was the case, using such a despicable method on an expert that even he couldn't see through. But Zhao Qian deserved to be killed. I didn't discipline him well. I hope you don't mind. The Zhao family's patriarch lowered his posture. Great-grandfather. Chen Shishir woke up. Shishir, are you okay? The Zhao family's patriarch looked at Chen Shishir, who had been drugged, and then looked at Zhao Qian's corpse with a pained expression. Although he wasn't related to Chen Shishir by blood, Chen Shishir had been intelligent since she was young, and he liked her very much. But now, his great-grandson almost did something to her. He couldn't help but feel a little guilty. After explaining the reason, the Zhao family's patriarch was reasonable and coldly ordered to clean up Zhao Qian's corpse. They now began to talk about business. According to Chen Shishir, the sheepskin scroll had been broken by a young man in front of him. In his heart, he was even more shocked. One had to know that a few years ago, he was injured because of this and had only slightly recovered now. Great-grandfather, to be honest, we rushed here today because this senior wants to know about the Three Immortal Island. I wonder if the Zhao family has any of its collections? Chen Shishir said truthfully. After being shocked, the Zhao family's patriarch calmed down. He looked at Lin Yu with a strange expression. He was guessing which blessed land Lin Yu came from to have such strength. There should be, the Zhao family's patriarch said. The Zhao family's power in the royal city wasn't very big. There were only 2 Spirit King realm experts in the family. However, to be able to gain a foothold in the royal city, the foundation and collection of the family was naturally not low. The Zhao family's old ancestor immediately ordered people to bring over the ancient records of the Three Immortal Islands. This was the Zhao clan's secret, and it was strictly forbidden for it to be leaked. However, after meeting Lin Yu, he was shocked. He knew that he could only befriend such an expert. Zhao Qian had already offended him earlier. If he didn't apologize now, it was very likely that his entire Zhao clan would suffer because of this. Lin Yu used his divine will to scan through the ancient books that were sent to him and locked onto the books that were useful to him. A yellowed ancient book appeared in his hand. Most of these books only recorded a few words about the Three Immortal Island. Their understanding of the Three Immortal Island was limited. Only the ancient book in Lin Yu's hands recorded a legendary anecdote. I didn't expect that there would be records of the first emperor in this era, Lin Yu muttered. Logically speaking, the first emperor, as a reincarnator, had already awakened in the previous era and headed to an unknown part of the universe. There shouldn't be any records of him in the era of reincarnation. The information recorded in the book was about the first emperor's search for immortality and medicine in order to seek immortality. This legend was also recorded before Lin Yu transmigrated. Although there were some discrepancies, they were generally very similar. Unfortunately, there was still no specific record of the Three Immortal Islands. Perhaps the first emperor deliberately left this message for the things on the Immortal Islands. Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu both guessed so. However, they didn't know why the first emperor didn't find the last thing in the end. Lin Yu put the ancient book away. I know. There should be related records in an organization. Seeing that the Zhao clan's collection wasn't of much use, the Zhao clan's patriarch suggested. We can go and take a look, Lin Yu said. Now that he had a map to the Immortal Islands, there shouldn't be any problems going there. If he really didn't get any useful information, he would have to go to the Immortal Islands himself. The Zhao clan's patriarch personally led the way. They passed through several hidden streets. It gradually became dark and damp. The place they were going to was the largest underground organization in the entire Huaxia. It took on a lot of business. Moreover, it had been passed down for a very long time. It had experienced many wars and remained standing. They had collected many secrets about Earth. This was also the reason why the Zhao clan's patriarch brought Lin Yu here. After a round of probing, Yi Zichen said, only then did the organization called Yao Tian reveal its true appearance. Most of the people who came here hid their auras. However, it was rare for a Spirit King realm expert, like the Zhao clan's patriarch, to come here personally. The information they wanted to learn was not ordinary. Therefore, the Zhao clan's patriarch paid a great price to reach the highest level of the Yao Tian organization. They saw a black-robed man in the lead. His aura was very restrained. There were 2 people on the other side. There were a total of 3 people, all of whom were Spirit King realm experts. 2 Spirit King realm experts could establish a foothold in the royal city. As for the Yao Tian organization, there were already 3 Spirit King realm experts. It was unknown how many experts were hidden among them. Through the words of the Zhao clan's patriarch, he knew that the Yao Tian organization was once jointly killed by the 10 major forces of the royal city more than 10 years ago. However, it still existed to this day. It was enough to show how powerful it was. Lin Yu released his divine consciousness. I didn't expect there to be a creature that has surpassed the Spirit King realm here. However, its condition doesn't seem right. Its aura is very weak, Lin Yu said slowly. The royal city was indeed the center of the entire Huaxia. It was located in the Dragon Vein area. In a course of time, a creature seemed to have broken through the shackles and was now standing in the Emperor realm. However, that creature's condition didn't seem right. It was currently in a deep sleep. Breaking through to the Emperor realm on Earth today would cause one to be suppressed by the Great Path and be slashed by the Great Path. This creature should have also defied the heavens and encountered a disaster during the breakthrough. That was why it had been in a deep sleep. It would not wake up unless it was absolutely necessary. Why are you here? The leader of the black-robed men said slowly with a hoarse voice. Lin had already seen through it. This black-robed man was a puppet. A puppet with the strength of a Psionic King realm cultivator was extremely shocking to the current Earth. We need information about the 3 Immortal Island, the patriarch of House Zhao said straightforwardly. The value of this information is too great. Can you afford it? The puppet asked. This didn't surprise the patriarch of House Zhao. After all, there were rumors about the Immortal Island that contained an opportunity to become an immortal. By becoming an immortal, they meant breaking through to the Emperor realm. For the cultivators on Earth, this was a great temptation. It was enough to make all the cultivators step forward one after another. What do you want in exchange? The patriarch of House Zhao asked. It depends on what you can offer and whether it's worth it or not, the puppet continued. This put the patriarch in a difficult position. Because of his injuries in the past few years, he had used up a lot of natural treasures. The entire house, Zhao didn't have many things left to exchange. Lin Yu threw out an item. It was a pill formula that recorded the refinement of the breakthrough pill. Is this enough? Lin Yu said casually. The refinement method of the breakthrough pill was very simple. As long as the herbs were collected, refining it wasn't difficult. This pill formula was nothing to Lin Yu. After receiving the pill formula, one could see that even the puppet was trembling unconsciously. A pill formula that can support a cultivator in the 4 symbols realm to break through to the Spirit King realm. The eyes of the person behind the puppet were filled with shock. They forced themselves to calm down. The puppet said, if it's real, it's naturally enough. Even the patriarch of House Zhao was shocked when he saw Lin Yu's generosity. Only now did he realize that he had underestimated Lin Yu. With such generosity, Lin Yu's background was even more terrifying than he had imagined. It was simply unimaginable. Lin Yu took out a bottle of pills that had already been refined. There was obvious change in the eyes of the 3 of them. However, they quickly suppressed this emotion. Soon, the ancient book that recorded the 3 Immortal Island was sent to Lin Yu. After a simple glance, Lin Yu and the others turned around and left. They returned to House Zhao. Lin Yu, Ancestor Lu, and the others began to carefully analyze the things recorded in it. There should be immortals on the 3 Immortal Island, which is to say, Emperor Realm cultivators. Ancestor Lu said. Lin Yu was very sure of this. There was also an image of a stone talisman engraved on it. According to the legend, This was the thing that the immortal island guarded together. It had endless mysteries. Obtaining it would allow one to obtain endless fortune. It should be this thing, Lin Yu said. However, there was no record of its exact function. We can only comprehend it after we obtain it, Lin Yu said. If it could make a reincarnator think about it, it must definitely not be an ordinary thing. It was very likely that it had a lot to do with the upcoming Black Calamity. Thinking of this, not only Lin Yu, but Ancestor Lu's expression also began to become serious. They didn't stay for too long. After they were ready, they immediately set off. According to the information on the map, they arrived at the coast and set off towards the immortal island. The patriarch of House Zhao also followed behind Lin Yu and the others. After giving some instructions, he also set off. During this time, he became flattering and completely lost the demeanor of a top expert on Earth. This caused Chen Shishir's expression to become strange. Chapter 12:12. The Zhao family's patriarch bought a large ship. Amidst the blue waves, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. There were many fishing boats on the sea. When they saw the gorgeous ship that Lin Yu and the others were on, they unconsciously fixed their gazes on it until Lin Yu and the others left. Someone is following us. Lin Yu's divine sense was extremely sharp. At this moment, he had already sensed it. A group of people was following behind them. Judging from their auras, they seemed to be people from the Brilliant Heaven organization. Through Lin Yu's generosity, they had set their sights on him. Through the information that they had searched for the Three Immortal Island, they guessed that Lin Yu and the others might have already known the location of the Three Immortal Island. Every year, there were many cultivators who went out to sea to search for the Three Immortal Island. And from the Sleeping Emperor realm expert in the Brilliant Heaven organization, they had already learned that Lin Yu and the others were very terrifying. They had gathered at least an unknown expert at the peak of the Spirit King realm. This level was extremely rare even in the entire Huaxia. If they weren't confident, they wouldn't gather such a force to go out to sea. Even Lin Yu and the others didn't have the exact coordinates. If they could get something from Lin Yu, it would be very worth it. After all, Lin Yu could casually take out the formula for the breakthrough pill. It was hard to imagine how many secrets he was hiding. Lin Yu and the others weren't anxious. They knew that there were many secrets in the Brilliant Heaven organization. The ancient texts that they had obtained were probably incomplete as well. It was very likely that the Yao Tian organization had even more. The ship of the Brilliant Heaven organization had ancient formation patterns that could conceal its aura. If it wasn't for Lin Yu's powerful divine sense, he might not have been able to discover its traces. I didn't expect the Brilliant Heaven organization to do such despicable things. The Zhao family's patriarch's eyes were filled with anger. Lu Zhu and the others were very calm. With their strength, it was the hibernating Emperor Realm expert who had personally come out. There was no need for Lin Yu to make a move. Even if Lu Zhu's realm had been suppressed, he could still kill him. Gradually, a dense fog appeared in front of them. As they went deeper and deeper, they reached a point where they couldn't even see their own fingers. This made the expressions of the people on the Brilliant Sky organization's ship turn ugly. The fog here was very mysterious. It could block one's divine sense and vision. Even the tracking devices they had left on Lin Yu and the others were no longer as accurate as before. Until a certain moment passed. The compasses in their hands had completely lost their bearings, and the needle began to spin wildly. This should be the immortal mist that leads to the immortal island, as recorded in the ancient books. It seems that they have really grasped the path to the immortal island. Now, they are heading towards the correct location. A few Spirit King realm experts in Yao Tian's organization were overjoyed. The secret of the Three Immortal Islands was the lifelong dream of many cultivators in this era. And now, by chance and coincidence, they actually had a chance to reach that place. This meant that as long as they entered, they would be able to obtain endless fortunes. The people here all had a chance of ascending to immortality, reaching unimaginable cultivation realms. However, the main problem now was that they were already lost in the fog. The sea was boundless and the seawater looked the same. If they still couldn't find the location of Lin Yu and the others, they might be trapped here for the rest of their lives until their lives came to an end. This fog was very strange. Even the faces of Lin Yu and the others in the front gradually became solemn. Lin Yu's divine sense could only cover a radius of 1,000 miles. This distance was negligible compared to the entire sea. At this moment, the people in Yao Tian's organization gritted their teeth and took out a bright lamp. It was made of bronze and was stained with rust. It was almost decayed. These Spirit King realm cultivators walked forward and forced out their blood essence, dripping it onto the bronze lamp. The bronze lamp began to burn. It lit up the path ahead. This was also what Yao Tian's organization had found in the past few hundred years. This was suspected to be an item that had been left behind. It could light up the path ahead. However, its effect was very limited. It could only be used in the fog, and the consumption was very large. This was the first time they replenished it. It consumed a large amount of Spirit King realm cultivators' blood essence. If this continued, it was very likely that the Spirit King realm cultivators here would not be able to withstand the consumption. They would exhaust their blood essence and enter the nirvana state. However, even if they took out the bronze lamp, they still lost the location of Lin Yu and the others. They continued to travel for 2 hours. It shouldn't be like this. Could it be that they have already encountered a disaster? The puppet in Yao Tian's organization slowly said. He vaguely had a bad premonition in his heart, as if there would be great danger if they continued to move forward. Everyone in Yao Tian's organization had a serious expression at this moment. Are you looking for us? The Zhao family's patriarch's expression was cold as he stood at the bow of the ship. I didn't expect Yao Tian's organization to go back on their word. How disappointing. The Zhao family's patriarch stood at this moment without moving. He had once again regained the demeanor of a top expert on Earth. Although he had been injured a few years ago, and his cultivation had been damaged to a certain extent, however, he knew that Lin Yu, who was behind him, was unimaginably powerful. Even now, there was one person in Yao Tian's organization who had reached the late stage of the Spirit King realm. However, in his heart, Lin Yu was definitely powerful. On Earth, as long as the immortals did not appear, no one could threaten them. This was the limit of Zhao family's patriarch's imagination. He had no idea that even if the immortals appeared now, they would still be nothing in front of Lin Yu. I didn't expect you to have some tricks up your sleeves. You have already detected our location and were already on guard, the leader of Yao Tian's organization said slowly. He was just a puppet. No one knew where his real body was. I can use the item in your hands to find the way forward. The Zhao family's patriarch looked at the bronze lamp in the hands of the leader of Yao Tian. His tone was indifferent. The Zhao family's patriarch is only at the peak of the early stage of the Spirit King realm. Do you think that you alone can resist us? The leader of Yao Tian's organization said with a hoarse voice and a look of disdain. He did not mention Lin Yu and the others. This was because the patriarch of their organization had confirmed that they were indeed at the peak of the Spirit King realm. The patriarch had awakened not long ago and passed down a mysterious item. It could easily kill a peak Spirit King realm elite. I advise you to hand over the coordinates of the 3 immortal island obediently. We might consider sparing your lives, the leader of Yao Tian said slowly. There was a cruel look in his eyes. Everyone knew that even if Lin Yu and the others handed over the map of the 3 immortal island, the people of Yao Tian would not let them off. However, the people of Yao Tian had made ample preparations to ensure that nothing would go wrong. They had never expected that Lin Yu and the others would have an existence that surpassed the patriarch of Yao Tian. In that case, just kill them, Lin Yu said calmly, not wanting to waste any more time. It was as if his simple words and actions could determine the life and death of the people of Yao Tian. Ha ha ha! Are you joking? One of the people of Yao Tian said with a hearty laugh. Come at me if you have the ability, the Zhao family's patriarch said as he stood in front of them. Chapter 12:13. Chen Shishir couldn't bear to look at the old ancestor of the Zhao family. Under her influence, the old ancestor of the Zhao family, the person she called great-grandfather, was a powerhouse in Monarch City. But now, he was acting like a scoundrel. It was really embarrassing. The people of the Yao Tian organization became a little hesitant. They were worried that the old ancestor of the Zhao family had left some secret method on the ship that would cause them to die. At this moment, the leader of the Yao Tian organization was very calm. At the same time, he had absolute confidence. Right now, they had the method that their old ancestor had given them. Even if there were a few powerhouses at the peak of the Spirit King realm here, they could only die here. Why? You don't dare? The old ancestor of the Zhao family showed a pained expression and continued to provoke. I thought that the Yao Tian organization, which has been standing for hundreds of years, would be very powerful. I didn't expect that you're just a bunch of cowards. The old ancestor of the Zhao family couldn't help but shake his head. His eyes were full of disappointment. As you wish, the leader of the Yao Tian organization said casually. Just now, a bright light suddenly burst out from his palm. The light rose into the sky above the sea. The terrifying array directly enveloped the entire place. This was definitely a power that surpassed the Spirit King realm. The power of an immortal. There are indeed such powerhouses in the Yao Tian organization. The old ancestor of the Zhao family was shocked by the pressure from the array. Chun Shishir's cultivation was the lowest. At this moment, she couldn't withstand the pressure, and her face gradually turned pale. At this moment, the aura of Ancestor Lu and the others burst out. As expected, you're all powerhouses at the peak of the Spirit King realm. Your force is enough to sweep away all the forces in Huaxia. But when you meet the Yao Tian organization, you can only die here. The leader of the Yao Tian organization said with a mocking tone. The old ancestor of the Yao Tian organization had sealed the entire place. Even birds couldn't cross it. The aura of the Yu Qin goddess enveloped Chun Shishir. Otherwise, it was very likely that Chun Shishir would die on the spot under this pressure. Thank you, Senior. Chun Shishir's face was pale as paper. She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and said with difficulty. The Yu Qin goddess shook her head. They looked at the array in the sky together. However, their faces were very calm and did not reveal the slightest bit of panic. At their current level, it was only a small formation of the Emperor realm. Even if their realms were suppressed, it was still not enough. However, in terms of the accumulation of their realms, it was hard to imagine. Not to mention this Emperor realm cultivator, there was already a huge problem with his cultivation base. Even a true Emperor realm cultivator wouldn't be able to do much in front of any of them. However, the old ancestor of the Zhao family was startled when he sensed the aura behind him. Immediately, his body quivered. He had a hunch that Lin Yu was very strong. Unexpectedly, everyone here had already reached the peak of the Spirit King realm. He originally wanted to show off in front of Lin Yu. Who would have thought that he would become a clown instead? Lin Yu looked at the formation in the sky. Is this what you're relying on? Lin Yu said casually. He took a step forward. He arrived in the sky. He didn't even emit the aura of his cultivation. He only relied on the power of his battle constitution. The entire sky seemed to be unable to withstand the power of Lin Yu's battle constitution. Lightning surged. The power of his battle constitution was already so terrifying. It caused a phenomenon between heaven and earth. It seemed to have surpassed the Tao laws on earth. At this moment, punishment was about to befall and wipe out Lin Yu. Some of the people with low cultivation in the Yao Tian organization couldn't withstand the pressure of Lin Yu's battle constitution and couldn't help but kneel down. Hiss! One could hear the old ancestor of the Zhao family sucking in a cold breath. His pupils were dilated to the extreme. This was definitely an invincible existence. In the entire earth, the only one who could compete with Lin Yu was probably the hidden immortal. What Lin Yu displayed at this moment was only the power of his battle constitution. If he fully displayed his cultivation, in the eyes of the Zhao family's old ancestor, he might even be able to kill an immortal. This kind of person who only existed in legends had actually appeared in front of him at this moment. The Zhao family's old ancestor couldn't help but feel his mouth and tongue dry. Perhaps the senior's goal is to find a way to truly ascend to the immortal realm, the Zhao family's old ancestor muttered in a low voice. At this moment, the way he addressed Lin Yu had become extremely respectful. Boom! Under Lin Yu's punch. In the sky, brilliant flames bloomed. The supreme formation bestowed by the Emperor Stage powerhouse directly exploded under Lin Yu's punch. Lin Yu bathed in the flames and slowly appeared in front of the people of the Yao Tian organization. The people of the Yao Tian organization were still mocking him a second ago. At this moment, they were already standing on the spot in a daze. It had already exceeded their imagination. The pupils of the leader of the Yao Tian organization contracted at this moment. All of this was something he hadn't expected. They knew that there were a few cultivators at the peak of the Spirit King realm here. But this was simply too shocking. With the strength of his physical body, he broke the formation left behind by the Emperor's stage. If he displayed his full strength, would their old ancestor be a match for him? The people of the Yao Tian organization were already beginning to doubt. Lin Yu stood in front of everyone with a cold look in his eyes. If you dare to kill me today, there will be no place for you in the entire Huaxia, or even on Earth. Even the forces you belong to will be turned into ruins before you return. The leader of the Yao Tian organization threatened at this moment. The Zhao family's old ancestor and Chun Shishir's faces were very pale. They didn't doubt the intelligence ability of the Yao Tian organization at all. If the Zhao family and the Chun family were really like this, it was very likely that they would really be annihilated into the dust of history and disappear from the world forever. Chun Shishir and the Zhao family's old ancestors' expressions became ugly. There was hesitation in their eyes. After all, there were people in their families that they missed, especially the Zhao family's old ancestor. The entire Zhao family was painstakingly built up by him. No one has ever threatened me in front of me, Lin Yu said indifferently. He looked at the leader of the Yao Tian organization from a distance with a cold look in his eyes. You're just a puppet. Do you think that I can't kill you just because you're hiding in the organization? Lin Yu said slowly. He crushed the leader of the Yao Tian organization with one hand. He restrained a wisp of divine consciousness from it. He looked at it indifferently. The terrifying power of divine consciousness. It invaded it. Then, across an endless distance, in the depths of the Yao Tian organization, an old woman in seclusion suddenly opened her eyes. There was a look of horror in her eyes. You're not at the peak of the Spirit King realm, but before she could finish her words, Lin Yu's divine consciousness had already reached her place of seclusion. The old woman didn't have time to send a message. Who dares to kill my descendant? A majestic voice sounded. There was a hint of threat in it. An endless amount of divine sense was surging. It attacked Lin Yu's divine consciousness, which was now emitting a golden light. But it didn't have the slightest effect. Lin Yu pointed his finger, and the old woman's aura suddenly stopped. Even if she was an expert at the peak of the Spirit King realm. Under Lin Yu's divine consciousness, she couldn't resist at all. Do you want to die too? Lin Yu's divine consciousness turned into a shadow. At this moment, the golden power of divine consciousness was burning like a flame on his body. Chapter 12:14. The aura of an Emperor Realm cultivator was fully displayed. Moreover, Lin Yu's three essences in one realm had reached the flawless realm. Now that he was facing an incomplete Emperor Realm cultivator, Lin Yu completely crushed him in all aspects. Just a wisp of his aura was enough to make him unable to withstand it. He saw the shadow of a huge python wailing at this moment. He could not help but reveal fear, even if it was called an immortal on Earth. In front of Lin Yu, it still did not seem to care. Lin Yu's aura alone was enough to injure him, even though they were separated by an endless distance. After it saw Lin Yu's divine consciousness, it lost its arrogance and actually fled. The entire royal city was intimidated by the great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization. All the powerhouses woke up from their seclusion and came to the sky. They looked in the direction of the Yao Tian organization. Oh no, the great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization has awakened. The expression of the strongest powerhouse of one of the 10 major forces in Royal City became very unsightly at this moment. What happened? The great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization seems to be afraid of something and is now fleeing? The other person's face was filled with fear, and a look of doubt appeared on his face. They all knew of the great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization. Otherwise, the Yao Tian organization would have been destroyed more than 10 years ago in the process of besieging them. The great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization had always been a thorn in their hearts. However, seeing him fleeing at this moment, they were very shocked. It was hard to imagine what kind of person in the current world could make living beings known as immortals feel fear. All of this happened very quickly. The great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization could no longer care about anything else. Terrifying black clouds formed in the sky above Royal City. Thunder and lightning filled the air. The silver snake descended and destroyed everything. A large number of city buildings were damaged as a result. The power of an Emperor Realm cultivator was not allowed by the Tao laws of Earth. As long as such a creature was born, it would be punished by the heavens. This was also why the great ancestor of the Yao Tian organization had been in hibernation after attaining the Tao hundreds of years ago. Lin Yu looked indifferently at the giant snake in the sky that was constantly fleeing into the distance. The threat of the heavenly tribulation was far less than that of Lin Yu. There was only one thought in its mind, and that was to escape. Lin Yu didn't stop him from escaping. Lin Yu's spiritual will slowly dissipated. Within the boundaries of the East Sea, Lin Yu used his mind power to project a portion of the scene within the Yao Tian organization. The members of the Yao Tian organization were stunned. They all saw it clearly. He didn't even know where his own ancestor had fled to. The powerful factions in Royal City had already given the order to investigate the cause of old ancestor Yao Yin's fear. Zhao family's old ancestor stood there in a daze. This scene was also clearly seen by him. He only felt that his current body no longer belonged to him. His back was vaguely covered in cold sweat. He completely did not expect that Lin Yu's strength was already terrifying to this extent. Even the legendary immortals on Earth could only flee in front of him. At this moment, Lin Yu had already opened his eyes coldly. He threw down the black robe in his hand, with just a gentle swipe of his palm. The remaining members of the Yao Tian organization all turned into a mist of blood and dissipated amidst their terrified screams. A strong smell of blood drifted over the East Sea. Lin Yu took the copper lamp into his hand. The misty fog here began to slowly dissipate. The few of them no longer looked at the broken hull of the Yao Tian organization. They continued to follow the direction recorded on the map and continued to move forward. They didn't know how much time had passed. They finally walked out of the endless fog. In the records of Earth, there was a rumor that someone had entered the immortal island by chance. As a result, he obtained a great opportunity and established an immortal force. Zhao family's old ancestor told him what he knew. At this moment, his attitude towards Lin Yu became more and more respectful. In the end, he shamelessly mingled with Chun Shirshir and listened to Lin Yu's teachings. He also benefited a lot from listening to Lin Yu's teachings. In the end, he directly broke through to the middle stage Spirit King realm on the ship. For Zhao family's old ancestor, this was an endless fortune. At the same time, he was also very excited. He repeatedly thanked Lin Yu. Lin Yu just nodded lightly. These things were very simple for him. Chen Shirshir was already speechless at the side. His great-grandfather didn't seem to be very serious. He was not quite the same as the person in his heart. A month later, the few of them had already arrived at an unknown sea area. As far as the eye could see, only a few small islands could be seen. The few of them were sitting cross-legged on the ship. The road ahead was very lonely. However, for Lu Zhu and the others who had lived for countless years, this little bit of time was nothing. They felt the temperature of the map in their hands become boiling hot. Lin Yu and the others knew that they were already very close to the location of the immortal island. It was just that for some reason, they couldn't sense its exact location. During this time, Chun Shirshir's realm had also settled down very deeply. He believed that as long as he had enough energy and matter, he would be able to break through to the current top combat strength of Earth, the Spirit King realm. This kind of progress made even Zhao family's old ancestor feel extremely shocked. At the same time, he sighed at Chun Shirshi's talent. Now, Lin Yu was increasingly certain that Chun Shirshi was definitely a reincarnator, because through the God King's token, he could vaguely see Chun Shirshi's previous life. If that was the case, then there would be a day when they would meet again. That aura made Lin Yu feel a little surprised. Chun Shirshi's true body before he reincarnated had definitely surpassed the ancestor realm. With Lin Yu's current realm, he couldn't see through the river of time. Just after Lin Yu and the others sat cross-legged for a period of time, the parchment in Lin Yu's hand suddenly became incomparably hot, as if he was holding magma. The parchment involuntarily flew out. It arrived high in the sky, emitting a blazing yellow light. On the calm surface of the sea, suddenly, it became turbulent. The entire hull of the ship was like a leaf, and it felt like it was about to fall. At this time, Zhao family's old ancestor stood up and said, "Seniors, it's just a small storm. You all rest, and let little Zhao suppress it." Zhao family's old ancestor was extremely clear about his own status. He used his divine ability to stabilize the entire ship. On the parchment, an ancient beam of light shot out. It directly illuminated an area. On the surface of the sea, there was a rumbling sound. It was as if something was gradually unsealing itself. Dense immortal chi began to fill this sea area. The originally ordinary sea area was gradually shrouded in mystery. "There's a sage realm array here." Luzu nodded and said, "No wonder, since ancient times, among the cultivators on Earth, they had only heard of legends and had never truly seen the 3 immortal islands. It turned out that there was a sage realm array here. In the Age of Doom, the Emperor realm was already the limit. How could they discover this place? Who opened the immortal islands array?" A berating voice appeared in the area enveloped by the immortal chi. When the immortal chi there dissipated slightly, the full appearance of the immortal island was revealed. "Excuse me, which immortal island is this? Penglai, Yingzhou, or Fangzhong?" Lin Yu stood at the bow of the ship and slowly asked. "I didn't expect that there would still be people in the current world who know the name of the immortal island. This place is Yingzhou. Please leave." A person who looked like a boy with a fair face directly issued an expulsion order. "I came to the immortal island to look for the item that the first emperor was looking for back then. Please inform him," Lin Yu said slowly. As the immortal king of a universe, he was already very polite to a boy from the immortal island. "It's a special period now. The immortal island doesn't accept outsiders." The boy said, "Even if you have a token, you can't. Then please ask your island master to come out and meet me." Lin Yu faced the boy and said calmly. At this moment, Lin Yu no longer hid his cultivation base. The pressure of the Emperor realm began to envelop the entire immortal island. Violent winds and waves swept across. The boy's expression changed. "An Emperor realm expert. I didn't expect such an expert to be born on Earth today." The boy's vision was very high. Although he was in the Spirit King realm, he could still see Lin Yu's cultivation base. The entire immortal island shook. Chapter 12:15. This aura caused the expression of the boy guarding the immortal island to gradually become solemn. Lin Yu's cultivation in the Emperor realm seemed to be greater than he had expected. However, there shouldn't be such a strong person on Earth right now. The world no longer allowed this kind of power to be born. However, everything was happening right in front of his eyes, so he couldn't help but be shocked. Just as the sky and Earth were about to change, Lin Yu's aura became more and more terrifying. It almost enveloped the entire sea area. Where did such a powerful being come from? A majestic voice sounded from the immortal island. There was a slight hint of surprise in the coldness. An old man appeared. He wore a gray Taoist robe and had the demeanor of an immortal. The aura on his body was extraordinary. He was definitely an Emperor realm powerhouse. Lin Yu faced the aura that was crushing towards him. His figure did not move. His sleeves fluttered slowly with the water vapor that surged towards him. The master of the immortal island slowly appeared in the sky at this moment. His expression was calm. At his current level, it seemed that there was nothing that could affect his emotions. To be able to break through to the Emperor realm on Earth today, Even on the immortal island that was full of glorious chi, it was still very moving. Lin Yu withdrew his aura after seeing the master of the immortal island. I'm from Earth in my previous life. It's a little presumptuous to visit the immortal island. Please forgive me. Lin Yu cupped his hands and revealed his identity. It wasn't until Lin Yu said this that the master of the immortal island's expression changed slightly. Are you a reincarnated being on Earth who has awakened? The master of the immortal island asked in a questioning tone. Lin Yu wasn't surprised that the master of the immortal island knew about the title of a reincarnated being. The immortal island stood above the Earth's reincarnation and was eternal. Naturally, there were many things that were known about it. You can also call me a reincarnated being, but the way I awakened is different, Lin Yu answered calmly. If that's the case, then come into the immortal island. We can slowly discuss this. The master of the immortal island invited. Lin Yu and the others' goal was to enter the immortal island, so they did not refuse. The scenery on the immortal island was not as grand as he had imagined. On the contrary, it was natural and simple. There were barely any buildings in sight. Entering the immortal island, there was a slippery, narrow path. Ancient trees grew on both sides of the path, and spirit deer ran about, drinking from the mountain stream. The dense, immortal mist shrouded the mountain forest. It was peaceful, like a fairyland. The suppression of the Earth's great Tao here didn't seem to be that intense. It was almost undetectable. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they arrived at the center of the island. There was only a simple thatched hut with farm tools and bamboo hats hanging on it. It contrasted nicely with the surrounding environment. At this moment, Lin Yu's expression became a little strange. That was because he was very familiar with the thatched hut. It seemed to be similar to the buildings at the locations where he had revived every time he had reincarnated. They were practically the same. It was just that there were some additional items on it. Lin Yu's expression only flashed for a moment, and he quickly calmed down. He had long known that there must be many secrets in the places where he had revived every time he reincarnated. It was just that he had never had the time to explore them. Lin Yu already had an idea in his mind. After this matter was over, perhaps it was time to return to the 12 universes and go to that place to explore it. They entered the thatched hut, and the boy made tea. Lin Yu's eyes unconsciously scanned the surroundings. Not only was it similar, but the aura was also very similar. This is enlightenment tea. It is very beneficial for cultivation, the owner of the immortal island said slowly. He already knew that the true realm of Lin Yu and the others was definitely not at the peak of the Spirit King realm or the Emperor realm. They were far more powerful than he had imagined. He had been on the immortal island for thousands of years and knew many secrets that people on Earth did not know. I want to ask why Earth is called the land of reincarnation. Lin Yu went straight to the point. Not only Lin Yu, but also Ancestor Lu and the others wanted to know. Because there were many unimaginable experts on Earth who were still in the reincarnation cycle. They had to find out what secrets were hidden behind all of this. After all, the Black Calamity was coming, and the universes could not escape. The creatures on Earth who were in the reincarnation cycle were probably the key to solving the Black Calamity. After all, in the 12 universes, the strongest experts on the surface were only in the Ancestor realm. As for the original God realm experts, even if they existed, their condition was not very good. It was very likely that they were on the verge of death. In the first universe, they were once extremely powerful in the past. However, the strongest among them had already entered the other side of the realm sea and were fighting. Among them, there were already many who had truly passed away. Not even their true spirits were left behind. Even the sect master of the Western sect, who had truly transcended the universe, was only left with a remnant soul. He was dying in the realm sea, resisting the waves of the realm sea and guiding the lost experts to return. No universe could escape from it. Although the master of the immortal island only had the cultivation base of the Emperor realm, he had experienced the last reincarnation. He also had some understanding of the structure of the world. At that time, it was the time he understood that all living beings had truly died. Even the reincarnators hiding on Earth would not be able to escape this calamity. Earth was a place created by unimaginable great figures in the past. It was a place created by the joint efforts of the real supremes in order to evolve something. However, later on, too many experts died in the war, so this place evolved into the land of reincarnation. They hoped that after endless years, some people's true spirits could be revived. The master of the immortal island spoke at this time, telling the information he knew. How powerful must the experts be to reconstruct the reincarnation cycle under the joint efforts? The beautiful eyes of the second palace master of the 10-direction realm revealed a look of surprise. They all knew what reincarnation represented. The more powerful a person was, the more he or she had transcended reincarnation. Earth could guide the true spirits of the experts and revive them after endless years. I am a remnant of 3 eras. I am not a true reincarnator. I am merely borrowing the power of the celestial island to prolong my feeble existence. Immediately after, the master of the celestial island sighed and looked at the sky in a leisurely manner. Lin Yu and the others passed by the master of the immortal island. Such words made them even more shocked by the power of Earth. If the day of the reincarnation cycle was the true day, no matter how powerful one was, they still could not escape. Everything would enter the nirvana cycle and return to the reincarnation cycle. Is the first emperor the only reincarnator in the last era who was revived? Patriarch Lu was puzzled. He did not count Lin Yu in, because Lin Yu was not a true reincarnator. It was only because he had transmigrated to the 12 universes and had the protection of the king of God's order that he could escape the purge of Earth. Until now, he had not recovered the memory of his previous life. Moreover, he had not even reached the divine king realm in his previous life. He was far from being qualified to enter the reincarnation cycle of Earth. Perhaps it was because of the special power of the king of God's order that he entered Earth and entered the reincarnation cycle. It was also because of this that he became so powerful. Although the 12 universes were weak in the past, there must be secrets in it. Otherwise, my father, the former divine king, would not know about Earth and send his true spirit into the reincarnation cycle. Lin Yu speculated in his heart. Chapter 12:16. Through the master of the immortal island. Lin Yu and the others already had their own preliminary guesses about the name of the land of reincarnation on Earth. As the first emperor, he dared to call himself an emperor. His boldness has already surpassed most of the reincarnators. It's because he was too powerful. In the battle before ancient history, he fought at the forefront, so he was the most seriously injured. Otherwise, he would have recovered a long time ago. The master of the immortal island said slowly. It's also because he was too detached that he cut off the path of others in the previous era. When one person achieved the Tao, it was difficult for all the reincarnators to wake up. They could only wait for this era. The master of the immortal island told the truth. When the first emperor left, he said that his awakening had a lot to do with the appearance of the variable. However, he didn't say in detail. He had a premonition that there was a threat ahead, so he led his former followers to an unknown place. The variable, everyone was a little puzzled. According to the master of the immortal island, the first emperor was definitely extremely powerful. The variable that could make him recover in advance must be beyond everything. Lin Yu sat calmly. He learned from Bai Qi. He might have a lot to do with the variable. What's your relationship with the first emperor? Lin Yu asked. I was once the first emperor's alchemist. I almost forgot the name of the previous era, the master of the immortal island said with a sense of loss. Although he escaped the punishment of the previous era, the marks of the Tao still left irreparable wounds on his body. Therefore, his realm was still at the peak of the emperor realm in the past few thousand years, and it was difficult for him to make any progress. Usually, he was in a deep sleep. Lin Yu was immersed in his memories. He thought of the legend he had heard on Earth. Without any hesitation, he said the name of the master of the immortal island, Su Fu. Back then, the first emperor really ordered Su Fu to take 300 boys and girls to the immortal island to find the elixir of immortality. The expression of the master of the immortal island changed abruptly. His face suddenly turned sharp. The aura on his body suddenly became incomparably blazing. Almost at some point, he was about to break through to the Emperor realm. Even the Jade Pure Divine Lady and the others didn't expect this change. They had not expected this at all. In Earth's age of chaos, all high-end powers were suppressed. There were still people who broke through to the limit. Now, it was clear that the master of the island, Su Fu, had definitely reached the Saint Realm a long time ago. However, due to the influence of the changing era, it had fallen. Even now, it had yet to recover. It wasn't until Lin Yu had said his name that the dormant power within him had awakened on its own accord, allowing him to stand at the pinnacle. You know my name? It was only after a long while that the energy in Su Fu's body gradually subsided. His body no longer had the slightest trace of age. It was as if he had become 1,000 years younger. His hair had already turned white. He was brimming with chi and blood. Although he hadn't broken through to the Sage Realm, he was at the peak of the Emperor Realm. It was amazing enough that such a small planet like Earth was able to give birth to such a strong cultivator who was only one step away from the Saint Realm. Furthermore, Su Fu was not a reincarnator. This kind of talent would be extremely rare in the incipient extent. Lin Yu appeared very calm. He didn't react at all to Su Fu's question. Even if Su Fu had broken through to the Saint Realm, he wouldn't be much of a threat to Lin Yu. The 100-fold increase in power in the God King's order was enough to severely injure the Divine Priest of Light when he had just entered the Emperor Realm. If it weren't for the six-winged God King, the Divine Priest of Light would have disappeared completely at that time. I understand now. You are the variable that the first Emperor mentioned. Su Fu could no longer maintain his composure. He was ordered to guard the immortal island on the orders of the first Emperor. Now, thousands of years had passed, and he had been guarding the island. When he finally saw the person the first Emperor mentioned, he became very emotional. He had already found the immortal island back then, but the restriction here was very strong. Even after he entered, he couldn't find his way back. He couldn't bring back the item the first Emperor mentioned. He wanted to follow the first Emperor and witness the Supreme Land. Even if he was reduced to cannon fodder, he still wanted to be by the first Emperor's side and fight. But time passed, and it was all too late. It wasn't until 3,000 years ago that he finally broke through to the Saint Realm and understood the rules of the Immortal Island. But at that time, he was already at the critical point of reincarnation. The first Emperor had already left Earth and went to the unknown land to fight. He only received the first Emperor's final order to wait for the variable to arrive and then hand over the item of the Immortal Island to him. Only now did he meet it. Lin Yu looked at Su Fu, whose Tao heart was stable and indestructible, and became very emotional at this time. It could be seen how charismatic the first Emperor was back then, to be able to make a killing godlike by Qi follow by his side. But Lin Yu also didn't understand why he was the variable that the first Emperor mentioned. If they really talked about it, back then, he was only the youngest son of the old God King in the 12 universes, and his cultivation level was only at the God King realm. In the eyes of the experts of their level, they shouldn't care at all. Could it be that there was still some secret about his identity? Lin Yu thought to himself. It was just that the first Emperor didn't leave any clues behind. Perhaps the peerless experts, including the first Emperor himself, had deduced something, which was why they had said that. Thinking of this, not only Lin Yu, but Ancestor Lu and the others also looked in Lin Yu's direction. Their hearts were now filled with doubts. However, Su Fu shook his head and said, "The first Emperor once said that your identity is very special, and you might be the last key. Only you can control the item on the Immortal Island." This might be one of the reasons why the first Emperor didn't take away the mysterious item on the Immortal Island. "Follow me," Su Fu called out to Lin Yu and the others. When they arrived at the back of the thatched hut, they saw an ancient well that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. The aura of time was exuding from it. Although the bricks piled up on it had long collapsed. But from Ancestor Lu and the others, who had already reached the Ancestor realm and the God King realm, they could clearly sense it. The ancient well that was covered in moss was definitely not as ordinary as it looked. As Su Fu waved his big sleeve, the ancient well began to shake. They saw a few ancient words appear on the ancient well, which they didn't recognize. However, each and every character in the ancient script seemed to contain a Tao law. A supreme will began to emanate from it. Lin Yu's state of mind became clear under the illumination of the ancient words, like water. He slowly closed his eyes. These ancient words seemed to have come from before ancient history, and were naturally formed between heaven and earth. It was definitely not any of the words in the current world. Chapter 12:17. This was the condensation of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was formed by the use of these ancient characters. This is a great fortune. The 10 Square World's second palace master was surprised by the sudden change in the situation. She had been in the Divine King realm for many years and had been stagnant. However, at this moment, under the illumination of the ancient characters, his cultivation base had already started to loosen up. He seemed to be about to break through to the middle stage of the Divine King realm. And this was only the light of the ancient characters, but it could cause such a shocking result. If one were to comprehend all of these ancient characters, it would be hard to imagine how terrifying one's achievements would be. At least he knew. The progenitor realm was definitely not the end. At their level, they already knew that cultivation was boundless. There seemed to be no end to it. But after these ancient characters appeared, it seemed to be opening up the universe, making people feel a sense of boundless majesty in their hearts. They only knew when they arrived here. When one reached the progenitor realm, they were still as weak as ants in the eyes of the great Tao of heaven and earth. This was also the reason why Su Fu had quickly broken through to the peak of the Emperor realm in thousands of years. If he had not been cut down by the great Tao of earth, his achievements would have probably reached the saint realm on earth. This kind of tyrannical strength was very rare even in the once vast 12 universes. It was enough to show that Su Fu's talent and fortune were unimaginable. As long as he was given time to cultivate, his achievements would definitely be limitless. I have only comprehended the 9 ancient characters for a period of time, but it has never been as blazing as it is today. Is it because of your appearance? Su Fu looked at Lin Yu, who had just come into contact with the ancient characters for the first time, and whispered to himself. There was a puzzled look in his eyes, but when he remembered that this was the person mentioned by the first emperor, he immediately let go of the doubts in his heart. The ancient characters rotated in the sky. As their aura became stronger and stronger, everyone fell into the Tao comprehending state. This state was very mysterious, but it could magnify one's comprehension ability infinitely. Lin Yu had mastered the 8 tribes of the Great Void and was always in the Tao comprehending state. This was also the reason why his comprehension ability was far higher than any other cultivator. It was just that the Tao comprehending state guided by these ancient characters was far more profound than the Tao comprehending state of the Great Void 8 divisions that he had mastered. It was as if he had started from the most fundamental great Tao. The bell of the Tao resounded in everyone's hearts. Lin Yu seemed to have entered a strange space. There was no concept of time or space here. It was as if this was the only place that existed since time immemorial. No one knew where this place was. Lin Yu stood on the surface of the water with his eyes closed. Above his head, the 9 ancient words were rotating continuously. The aura they emitted was surging and slowly entering Lin Yu's body. This is a power that surpasses the ancestor realm. The Tao condensed from these ancient characters is difficult for me to comprehend right now. Lin Yu muttered to himself. The Tao laws contained within the words had already exceeded the limits of what he could comprehend as an ancestor realm expert, even though he was in the Tao comprehending realm. 2 types of Tao comprehending realm were added at the same time. He still felt that even if he looked at one of the ancient characters, he would still feel pain in his spirit sense, almost collapsing because of it. This was under the condition that the ancient characters did not have any offensive properties, but it was already so difficult for Lin Yu. If the ancient characters contained offensive properties, no one here would have survived. There was no suspense at all. Although it was difficult to completely comprehend, the benefits that Lin Yu gained were also huge. He seemed to have a much clearer understanding of the path of the ancestor realm. It was unknown how long had passed. Lin Yu slowly woke up from the Tao comprehending realm. Dressed in white, he stood on the calm surface of the lake. He was motionless. There was not the slightest ripple on the surface of the lake. The space here was very quiet. If Lin Yu had not opened his eyes, the environment here would have remained unchanged without the slightest change. After Lin Yu opened his eyes, the environment here seemed to have changed. Land gradually appeared in the distance. In the dense white mist, other things were born. Is this the appearance of the birth of heaven and earth? Lin Yu calmly looked at all of this. His eyes were deep as if he had seen through everything. However, with his current realm, he could not see through the essence of this space. He could only clearly feel that this seemed to be the evolution of heaven and earth. This was how the real universe was born. Although he had reached the original God realm, the evolution of heaven and earth was far less profound than this. This seemed to be the real creation of the world. He could see that there seemed to be living things gradually being born. However, all of this came to an abrupt end after an unknown period of time. It seemed that the Tao here was not complete. The 9 ancient characters here were not enough to evolve the real universe. The space here was about to collapse. Perhaps Lin Yu had touched some kind of taboo. At this time, the space was gradually heading towards destruction. Lin Yu looked at the 9 ancient characters in the sky and slowly said, "Although I am not enough to comprehend you now, I can remember and brand it in my sea of consciousness." Lin Yu's eyes became incomparably deep. He was copying the 9 ancient characters, as if he really wanted to imprint the 9 characters in his sea of consciousness. However, his ancient characters were too profound. It was just a simple copy, but Lin Yu felt that it was very difficult. His eyes were cracking, and his divine sense showed signs of dying. It could not withstand the mighty power of the 9 ancient characters. Every stroke, every drawing contained boundless power, and had the power to split the heavens and earth. However, Lin Yu's spirit had an indelible feeling. He forcibly increased his strength. He began to absorb the power of the 9 ancient characters. However, as time passed, Lin Yu had not even imprinted a single character when the space here was on the verge of collapse. Fragments kept falling. Every fragment here seemed to be a world of its own, and it contained boundless power. As long as one came into contact with it, even if one was in the ancestor realm, one would be annihilated. Not to mention that Lin Yu's current realm was suppressed to the Emperor realm. Lin Yu seemed to be unaffected by the changes in space. At this moment, the power of the God King's token began to emanate from Lin Yu's body. The gradually collapsing space here was forcefully reversed by him. All time was rewinding. Until a certain moment, the space here was restored to its original state. Lin Yu had made up his mind to brand the 9 ancient characters here in his sea of consciousness. At this moment, Ancestor Lu and the others had already withdrawn from the Tao comprehending state. One could see that their eyes were filled with shock. Obviously, they had all witnessed that scene at the same time. The beginning of the universe. When they calmed down, they turned their heads and saw that Lin Yu was still in that space. Moreover, it seemed that Lin Yu's state was very wrong. His divine sense had become very dim. It seemed that it could die out at any time. But for some reason, they could sense a supreme power from Lin Yu's divine sense that was about to die out. This aura came from the same source as the ancient characters they sensed. It was very similar. Lin Yu wants to refine these 9 ancient characters. 10 Directions World's second palace master learned of Lin Yu's thoughts. At this time, his eyes must have changed greatly. Everyone was shocked. Looking at Lin Yu's eyes, they began to worry. This was especially true for Patriarch Lu. His state of mind had always been indifferent. But seeing Lin Yu's thoughts now, he couldn't help but be shocked. As an ancestor realm expert, his perception was the most intense. The power emitted by these ancient characters was definitely not something they could covet now. But he thought that Lin Yu should have his own confidence in doing so. It was just that Su Fu didn't know why Lin Yu could stay in that space for so long. Everyone couldn't help but sweat for Lin Yu. Although the mighty power in his body had become more and more blazing, there was a problem with his divine sense. Then his cultivation base and battle body seemed to be dying out. Not long after, Lin Yu had almost turned into a piece of withered wood. His skin was wrinkled like an old man in his twilight years. Chapter 12:18. In the space, Lin Yu was operating the Tao, comprehending realm of the 8 great void sects. He wanted to resonate with the 9 ancient characters. The effect was minuscule, but the speed of copying was much faster than before. The first ancient character, like a primitive star, appeared in Lin Yu's consciousness. In the outside world, the entire immortal island was shaking. Lin Yu, he succeeded. The 10 Square World's second palace master sucked in a breath of cold air at this time. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. From the first time they met, Lin Yu had given him too many surprises. And these 9 ancient characters that contained the truth of heaven and earth, with Lin Yu's realm, he could comprehend it. It was really unbelievable. Su Fu also felt his mouth and tongue dry. He thought of the first emperor. After waking up, before leaving the earth, he also mastered 2 similar ancient characters. Just 2 ancient characters cause a strange phenomenon in heaven and earth, making the entire Milky Way, the ancient ruins of the heavenly court, tremble. At that time, the first emperor's strength had almost recovered to the peak. At that time, the first emperor only mastered 2 of these ancient characters. And with Lin Yu's current strength, how could he imprint these characters into the sea of consciousness was really unbelievable. Even if he didn't comprehend it, Lin Yu's realm was not enough to covet the mighty power in it. With the passage of time, along with the first ancient character, it imprinted into Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. One character had almost occupied Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, and he could no longer bear this power. Lin Yu was about to reveal nirvana. At that time, even the real spirit would no longer exist. Lin Yu didn't show the slightest bit of anxiety. The imprints of the 10 great demon kings appeared in the sea of consciousness, slowly floating in the sky of the sea of consciousness world. The realm of the 10 great demon kings had long been unpredictable. The moment the imprints of the 10 great demon kings appeared, there was an obvious effect. The imprint of the ancient characters began to be suppressed, and the imprint of the ancient characters began to slowly shrink under the power of the imprints of the 10 great demon kings. It was retreating until it appeared in the corner of Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. This kind of change made Lin Yu feel slightly surprised. He originally hoped that the imprints of the 10 great demon kings could temporarily suppress the imprint of the ancient characters. But it was obvious that the imprints of the 10 great demon kings were now more powerful than the ancient characters. Lin Yu thought that the ancient characters, after all, the imprints didn't represent the real power. If it were real words, it might be able to stand up to the 10 Fiend Kings marks. In this case, how terrifying was the real strength of the 10 great demon kings. Even the ancient characters that could open up the universe could hardly pose a threat to their remaining power. However, this was also good news for Lin Yu, because in this way, he would have the confidence to continue copying other ancient characters. As the first ancient character entered his body, Lin Yu seemed to have sensed some subtle changes taking place in his body. His consciousness was getting stronger and stronger. It was moving towards an immortal and indestructible state. Thanks to the combination of the 3 elements, his combat body and cultivation base were also nourished. Although their realms were suppressed at the moment, Lin Yu's strength would definitely reach a higher level after he left Earth. This was just the benefit of copying a character. If he copied all 9 ancient characters, even though it would be difficult for him to completely comprehend them at his current level, the benefits he would gain would be unimaginable. This made Lin Yu even more determined to refine all the ancient characters there. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed in the outside world. Lin Yu sensed that the space there had been stabilized by Lin Yu more than a dozen times, and he didn't know how many tens of thousands of years had passed. Up until now, Lin Yu had only managed to copy 5 words. As the 5 copied characters appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, His sea of consciousness became more and more mysterious. Moreover, there was a mysterious connection between these characters. Just now, the imprints of the 10 great demon kings could easily suppress them. However, as the 5 characters formed a connection and began to resonate, the imprints of the 10 great demon kings gradually showed signs of weakening. After all, the imprints didn't have any substantial power. They appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness only to help him break through to the ancestor realm. Now, the imprints of the 10 great demon kings didn't have much power left. However, even if there was only a little bit of power left, the power of the demon kings was still hard to estimate. Lin Yu could clearly feel that the imprints of the 10 great demon kings were enough to suppress the 9 copied characters in his sea of consciousness. When his realm was high enough, he could completely comprehend them. Lin Yu had a vague premonition that these 9 ancient characters would be of great benefit to him when he broke through to the next realm, the original God realm. After all, it contained the truth of heaven and earth and the supreme principle. The original God realm could open the heaven and earth, and what it needed was the comprehension of this principle. If Lin Yu could comprehend these 9 ancient characters in the ancestor realm, his power in the original God realm would surpass the ordinary original God realm experts. This was an opportunity. Lin Yu already knew that these 9 ancient characters were crucial to him. If he wanted to protect the entire 12 universes in the Black Calamity, the power of the ancestor realm was far from enough. He was afraid that even the original God realm wouldn't be enough in the Black Calamity. At his realm, if he cultivated according to the rules, he didn't have the time to do so. As time went by, Lin Yu could feel that tens of thousands of years had passed in this place. When he reached the 9th ancient character, it became incomparably difficult. There was a great connection between the 9 ancient characters, and they were all one. By now, Lin Yu's separate copying was equivalent to breaking the connection between the two. Then, he had to reconstruct it, which made it very difficult. The faces of the people guarding Lin Yu turned solemn again. They could see that Lin Yu had reached a crucial step. However, they were in the outside world, so they couldn't provide any help. Even the Jade, pure divine lady frowned. She was worried about Lin Yu's current state. Lin Yu also felt that if he wanted to copy the last ancient character, it would be extremely difficult. However, Lin Yu wasn't someone who would give up so easily. He was thinking of a specific solution. He began to rearrange the 8 ancient characters in his sea of consciousness, following the order he saw at the beginning. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. The plants here had experienced 4 seasons. One could see that Lin Yu's body was covered with withered leaves. However, Lin Yu's figure hadn't moved at all. After arriving here, the Zhao family's ancestor and Chun Shishir's realms were advancing rapidly. After a year, after some consolidation, Chun Shishir had broken through the barrier and entered the Spirit King realm. Even if he were to leave Earth, this talent would still be very shocking. Thinking that Chun Shishir was most likely a reincarnator, and he was likely to awaken in this era, Ancestor Lu and the others felt that it was reasonable. Otherwise, with such a speed of advancement, it would be too shocking. Chapter 12:19. In the blink of an eye, another year had passed. The Yuchen goddess had always been by Lin Yu's side to protect him. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The bright moonlight shone on Lin Yu's body, which was already covered in dust. The power of Lin Yu's divine consciousness suddenly began to erupt. It was as vast as the universe. Even though Lin Yu's current cultivation level was still suppressed to the Emperor realm, this power enveloped the entire Earth. The atmosphere was constantly surging with a torrential momentum. At this moment, there was not a single cloud on the entire Earth. They had all dissipated under the power of Lin Yu's divine consciousness. Lin Yu has awakened. Patriarch Lu's withered figure slowly rose from his sitting position. He had also been trying to comprehend the words imprinted on the ancient well. However, until now, the effects were minimal. In the past 2 years, he had also constantly entered the space where the ancient words had evolved. However, he understood that it was difficult to achieve an effect with the power of the progenitor realm. He had also thought of imprinting the ancient words into his sea of consciousness. However, after 2 years, there was only half of it in his sea of consciousness. This naturally did not mean that Patriarch Lu's talent was not good. He did not have the God King's token in Lin Yu's hand, so it was difficult for him to stay in that space for a long time. Being able to reach this step was already very good compared to others. It was only at this time that Su Fu calmed down slightly. He also saw Lin Yu's goal. He did not comprehend the 9 ancient words, but imprinted them into his sea of consciousness. If he really did comprehend it, he would only be able to rely on his progenitor realm cultivation to understand some things about the ancient words. When he thought about it this way, it was too terrifying. Even if Lin Yu was the only variable mentioned by the first emperor, it was impossible for him to be so powerful. Since ancient times, not many people have been able to completely master such ancient words. Even if 1 or 2 of them were mastered, it was already a supreme existence in the world. The phenomenon lasted for 3 days. Everyone on Earth was terrified. Many experts were analyzing this unnatural phenomenon. They didn't relax until they realized that this phenomenon didn't pose any real threat to the living beings on Earth. However, the entire cultivation world on Earth had a clear perception of this phenomenon. Any cultivator who was slightly stronger knew that this was caused by a terrifying divine sense. They did not know what kind of creature on Earth could cause such a phenomenon. Perhaps even the immortals and the legends did not have the strength to trigger such a phenomenon, right? The cultivation world had always been in a state of panic. On the 3rd day, Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. The dense golden light within it flashed and disappeared. One could vaguely see a few mysterious symbols within it. Lin Yu sighed deeply as the strange phenomenon emanating from his body slowly dissipated. How much time has passed? Lin Yu's eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life. Only 3 years had passed in the outside world, but Lin Yu felt that millions of years had passed. The white hair on his temples slowly turned black. More than 2 years. The jade pure goddess looked at the white hair on Lin Yu's temples, and her eyes were filled with heartache. She knew that Lin Yu now shouldered the fate of the 12 universes on his shoulders. He had not stopped improving his strength for a moment. Lin Yu stroked the jade pure goddess's hair and put a strand behind her ear. "I'm sorry to have made you worried." Lin Yu smiled, and his eyes were full of affection. Lin Yu did not have much to say to the jade pure goddess. She was always worried about him, and that was enough for Lin Yu to take care of her. "I just want you to be safe." The jade pure goddess held Lin Yu's hand and lowered her eyes, until Ancestor Lu coughed softly. The two of them let go of each other. Now that the ancient well had been opened, there were more important things to do. The 10 Square World's second palace master looked at Ancestor Lu with anger and blame. He had disturbed Lin Yu and the jade pure goddess. Ancestor Lu laughed dryly and said, "Since Lin Yu has finished branding the 9 ancient words, let's go into the ancient well and take out what we need." Su Fu nodded slightly in response. It was his mission to protect this thing. It was a task given to him by the first emperor before he left. Lin Yu nodded. Su Fu led the way. He had never stepped into the well before, so he did not know what dangers there were. Therefore, Ancestor Zhao and Chun Shirshir did not follow them. Looking at the ancient well, Chun Shirshir's expression changed. It was as if she had sensed something, until Lin Yu and the others stepped into the well. A cold intent was emitted from Chun Shirshir's eyes, and the aura on his body grew stronger. Ancestor Zhao saw that something was wrong. He hurried forward and asked, "Shirshir, what's wrong?" Ancestor Zhao was shocked by Chun Shirshir's power. This was no longer an aura that a Spirit King realm cultivator could emit. It contained a supreme will. Although Chun Shirshir was still in the Spirit King realm, there was a deep level of pressure within her body that made the Zhao family's patriarch unable to move. He thought of the conversation between Su Fu and Lin Yu, who mentioned the reincarnator. Is Shirshir one too? The expression of the Zhao family's patriarch changed greatly. He saw Chun Shirshir hovering in the air. The aura he exuded was completely different from before. His silver hair draped over his shoulders, and soon reached his waist. The old ancestor of the Zhao family could no longer withstand this supreme pressure. He wanted to stop Chun Shirshir from entering the ancient well, but he fainted before he could say anything. Chun Shirshir's figure slowly sank into the pitch-black ancient well. Lin Yu, who was already in the depths, had imprinted the ancient characters. His mind was unimaginably strong. He frowned slightly and said, "Someone is coming from behind. His aura is extremely strong." After hearing Lin Yu's words, Lin Yu's expression changed. Everyone's expressions turned grave. There were only Su Fu and the boy on the Immortal Island. Then who had entered? The aura that could make Lin Yu frown was definitely not simple. Lin Yu and the others seemed to have lost themselves in the ancient well. In the desolate environment, the slightest accident would make people feel that it was out of control. Lin Yu was very calm. As Chun Shirshir's aura got closer and closer, he was able to sense that although the oppressive might emitted by that aura was extremely powerful, his cultivation didn't seem to be very high. It was just that she had been climbing. It's Chun Shirshir. She's starting to awaken now. When Chun Shirshir got closer, Lin Yu could clearly sense that Chun Shirshir's aura was faintly present in this aura. A few of them stayed where they were. If Chun Shirshir was really starting to awaken, perhaps the situation here would be resolved immediately. Half an hour later, a cold white light appeared in front of the crowd. At this moment, Chun Shirshir had already shed his short hair. Her hair reached her waist, and her eyes were extremely cold, as if she had already extinguished all the emotions of living beings. "You're the variable that the first emperor mentioned?" Chun Shirshir, who was in the midst of awakening, looked at Lin Yu coldly with a doubtful look. "I don't know what the variable that you guys are talking about is." Lin Yu shook his head calmly. Chun Shirshir seemed to still have the emotions of this life. After hearing Lin Yu's reply, a hint of emotion flashed across her cold eyes. Chapter 12:20. You can't control the item here, so I'll take care of it. However, this emotion of a living being was fleeting, and Chun Shirshir became cold again. She said this directly after seeing Lin Yu. She seemed to have seen how weak Lin Yu was and felt that Lin Yu was not qualified to control this item. Lin Yu's expression remained calm in the face of all the doubts. "You haven't fully recovered yet. Perhaps you don't have the right to say that," Lin Yu said slowly. There was no room for doubt in his tone. Lin Yu was speaking the truth. Meanwhile, Su Fu was already feeling very uneasy. He knew how terrifying a reincarnator was. Even though Chun Shirshir was only at the peak of the spiritual king realm, she had already mastered the basic Dao laws of her previous life. This Dao law was not something that Lin Yu and the rest could withstand. Even if Lin Yu and the rest did not have their realm suppressed, they would not be able to withstand the Dao laws of a reincarnator. "Is that so? Then let me see if you're qualified," Chun Shirshir said emotionlessly. She waved her hand, and endless Dao laws came crashing down on Lin Yu. Ancestor Lu and the rest looked very solemn. "Step back first," Lin Yu said as he stepped forward. He knew that this was just a test by the reincarnator. However, if Lin Yu did not have the strength, he would be killed. No one doubted that Chun Shirshir would be soft-hearted at this moment. This unforeseen event caught everyone off guard. They had thought that Chun Shirshir, who had awakened, would help them enter the depths of the ancient well accurately. But now, in just a few words, he directly attacked Lin Yu. Lin Yu was not angry. The reincarnator was testing him. However, what he disliked the most in his life was other people displaying their arrogance before him, acting as if they were superior to him. Even if it was a powerful reincarnator who had awakened, Lin Yu took a step forward. He knew that, with his current comprehension of the ancestor realm, against the supreme Dao law, he had no chance of winning. There were only 9 ancient characters in his sea of consciousness. This was because Su Fu had already said that even someone as powerful as the first emperor, who could crush all the reincarnators of an era, could not be revived and only grasp 2 ancient characters. Now, even though Lin Yu had not completely mastered it, he could already use a small part of its power in his sea of consciousness. There is absolutely no problem in using it to defend against supreme Taoist laws. Moreover, Qin had not fully awakened yet. The Tao laws were not completely perfected. Boom! Two wisps of Tao force exploded inside the ancient well. Everyone could feel the pain in their divine consciousness, which was on the verge of collapsing. Lin Yu forcefully activated the power of an ancient character to protect everyone. The collision of the two Tao laws caused the imperishable ancient well to tremble, as if it could not withstand the force. It was not until a long time later that the Tao laws here began to show signs of fading. Lin Yu stood calmly in the field. The illusory figure of the 9 ancient characters surrounded him. "Do you want to continue?" Lin Yu asked simply. He still had some strength left. If they really started fighting, reincarnated Qin might not be able to gain the slightest advantage. Qin saw the ancient characters surrounding Lin Yu. He withdrew his Tao laws and said, "I didn't expect you to be able to imprint the origin text into your sea of consciousness." Qin did not show any surprise. Through Qin words, everyone learned that this ancient character was called the origin text. However, Qin did not continue to elaborate on the specifics. "You're barely qualified." Qin said, "Follow behind me." There was a mystery in the ancient well. Even Lin Yu and the others didn't manage to reach the depths even after spending several hours. The strange aura here could make people lose themselves in it. Even with Lin Yu's spiritual sense, it was difficult for him to determine the exact location. After reincarnator Qin spoke, she directly floated in a direction and slowly floated. As she spread her Tao laws, the path ahead had been illuminated. As she continued to move forward, the aura on her body became more and more intense. Her power was constantly growing. A ray of light appeared in the ancient well. It was full of gray, as if they had arrived at an unworldly place. The Tao laws of the first universe no longer existed here. There was an aura of silence here, and at the same time, there was a hint of sadness which seemed to come from some ancient creatures. When Qin arrived here, there was a hint of disappointment in her ruthless and cold eyes. There was a high platform in front of them, and there was a fragment on it. It seemed to be some kind of earthy pottery. Only the base was left. If one took a closer look, they could tell that it was a broken artifact similar to a pottery jar. There were no Tao laws intertwined on it, and it looked very ordinary. However, it was stained with a bloody mist. As for that deathly aura, it was emitted from the infected blood. Moreover, there was more than one living being's blood on it. Even though this artifact had been here for countless years, one could still sense the powerful aura of the blood on it. Whether you can get this artifact or not will depend on your luck. Qin said slowly. It was stained with the blood of the supreme living beings. Even now, the aura on it was still terrifying. It was not something that living beings could bear. At this point, Qin sat cross-legged in the void and closed her eyes. She was only responsible for bringing Lin Yu and the others here. Lin Yu looked at the broken artifact in the middle. Ancestor Liu and the others didn't know what use this artifact had for a supreme being to obtain it even at the cost of his own life. I can tell you clearly that this artifact is the ultimate means to suppress the Black Calamity. Before ancient history, there were countless supreme living beings who did not hesitate to exhaust their true spirits in order to obtain this artifact. Qin explained the use of this artifact. At the same time, she also mentioned the source of the blood on the artifact. Lin Yu nodded slightly. Hearing Qin words, a sense of solemnity rose in everyone's hearts. The history of the Black Calamity had begun long before ancient history. In that era, in order to suppress the Black Calamity, blood and bones were piled up. This was also the reason why the 12 universes began to wither in the future. It was difficult for even the ancestor realm to give birth to one. Now, Qin no longer cared. The aura on her body began to fade. It seemed that her revival this time was only because of the aura of this place. Goddess Yuqing and the others protected Qin behind them. The aura here was not something an early-stage Spirit King Rel person could bear. especially the blood on the artifact. Even Goddess Yuqing and the others had to stay far away from it to not be affected. Be careful. Goddess Yuqing looked at Lin Yu and cautioned carefully. Lin Yu replied calmly, no problem. The reincarnator had already said that Lin Yu should go forward to get himself. And now, only Lin Yu's power was the strongest here. No one could bear the blood on it. After only a dozen steps, Lin Yu could no longer bear it. Bang! Lin Yu's body exploded into a bloody mist. The power of the God King's order began to surge. Everyone's expression was solemn. They had only moved a few feet, but they could no longer bear it. The power of the God King's order spread out and forcibly revived Lin Yu's body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Yu moved a few feet forward, and then his body turned into a bloody mist again. He had experienced several life and death situations. It was hard to imagine that in the face of the pain of death, who could bear so many times in such a short period of time? This was a test of a state of mind. Every time Lin Yu used the power of the God King's order to recover his body, he would move a few feet forward. Chapter 12:21. Lin Yu continued to endure great pain, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. Even at this moment, he was still walking alone. There was no one beside him, only himself. He knew that even though he was only an ancestor now, there was no one in the entire 12 universes who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Lin Yu could only be alone. If he couldn't bear this pain now, there was no need to talk about later. At that time, the 12 universes would no longer exist. How could he protect the things he cared about? After a few hours, the distance of several hundred feet seemed incomparably difficult for Lin Yu. It was as if he was separated by endless years and distance, and it was difficult to completely reach it. The residual pressure of the true blood had already surpassed the ancestor realm. Lin Yu didn't doubt that even an original God realm expert wouldn't be able to bear this pressure and would die. Lin Yu was exchanging his life for that little bit of distance. Another few hours passed. Under the unbearable gaze of the crowd, Lin Yu finally reached the front. In front of the artifact, Lin Yu's body was covered in blood. Even with the support of the God King's decree, Lin Yu was still injured. It even hurt his origin. And now, he hadn't really died, so he didn't use the power of the God King's decree to reverse time. Lin Yu looked at the artifact on the stone platform. It was the base of a clay jar, which seemed to still contain blood. It had already dried up, and he didn't know what kind of creature had left it behind. The terrifying aura made Lin Yu's body explode again. But under the power of the God King's decree to reverse time, Lin Yu's body quickly reformed. When he saw his body again, Lin Yu had already reached out and grabbed the clay jar. The terrifying power began to spill out. The clay jar seemed to feel Lin Yu's aura, and at this time it began to shake. Involuntarily, Lin Yu could not bear this power. Lin Yu used the power of the 9 ancient characters. Even though he hadn't fully refined them, they seemed to be able to suppress time and space. This place seemed to have become an eternal unknown. Everyone's gazes were blocked when they reached this place. Even Ancestor Lu could no longer see through this place. It was unknown how many times Lin Yu's body had exploded. No one knew how much time had passed. Lin Yu wanted to make use of that short period of time to refine the jar for his own use. This process was very difficult. Every time Lin Yu exploded, he would only have a short period of time to infuse his aura into the jar in hopes of refining it completely. This will take time. A few days passed. Fortunately, the aura of the jar could be slightly suppressed by the 9 ancient characters. Otherwise, Lin Yu would not have stood a chance. Over the past few days, the pressure in the area had temporarily subsided. Lin Yu seemed to have taken the first step. He had already begun to refine the jar. At this time, Lin Yu's body suddenly disappeared. All the strange phenomena also disappeared in an instant. Only the 9 ancient characters in the void were left, suppressing the surroundings of the jar. The void was cracking inch by inch. Everyone's pupils were constricting. Boss, where'd he go? Everything was out of his expectations. They did not know where Lin Yu had gone, or his body and soul had been destroyed. Apparently, the Yuqing goddess and the others couldn't accept the final result. He should have entered the jar. Ancestor Lu's vision was very high. He had already vaguely guessed something. How could it be so easy for Lin Yu to refine this broken artifact that could suppress the Black Calamity? Perhaps he would have to go through an unimaginable test. Thinking of this, everyone nodded. This was very likely. However, although the pressure here had weakened, it still existed. It was not something that they could break through now that they were suppressed in the Spirit King realm. Now, they could only wait quietly for Lin Yu's news. They each sat cross-legged. However, Chun Shi, who was in the midst of awakening, still showed no signs of recovery. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Lin Yu in the jar world was now covered in blood. He was constantly fighting. In this place, the power of the God King's order seemed to have become very weak. There was some kind of suppression that made it difficult for Lin Yu's injuries to completely recover. Even the power of the God King's order to reverse time and space was not very useful here. This put Lin Yu in a dilemma of life and death. If the God King's order was useless here, then it was very likely that he would die here. However, in this world that had already been destroyed, there was an endless amount of danger. There was some kind of aura that was constantly destroying Lin Yu's vitality. In the end, some kind of aura here had even formed some kind of terrifying living creature, causing Lin Yu to fall into a bitter battle. Now that Lin Yu was in this world, his realm was no longer suppressed. His current realm, after being branded with the ancient word, was infinitely close to the middle stage ancestor realm. Even so, he was still injured. Moreover, a year had passed, and Lin Yu was still in the periphery of this world. There seemed to be another universe in the jar, but it was now broken. There were also very obvious broken Tao laws in it. In the past year, Lin Yu's progress was very slow, except for the fact that the living creature was too strong. He was still analyzing the origin of this place. In the original God realm, one needed to have an extremely high understanding of creation and destruction. This was a kind of understanding of the great Tao. And this world seemed to be more primitive than the Tao laws of the 12 universes. Moreover, because this place was broken, the Tao laws of heaven and earth were not complete and could be manifested in the void. This also helped Lin Yu's analysis to a certain extent. Lin Yu could easily comprehend the Tao laws of creation and destruction in this place. The great Tao of heaven and earth was being analyzed by him constantly. For an ancestor realm expert, the benefits of being able to enter this world were huge. He could comprehend the Tao laws of the original God realm in advance. Lin Yu took another solid step towards the original God realm. However, the danger here was still not eliminated. The 9 ancient words revolved around Lin Yu. After comprehending the Tao laws of this place, he had gradually begun to grasp the first ancient word branded in his body. Lin Yu's strength was constantly growing. Until a certain moment, he had completely broken through to the middle stage ancestor realm. This kind of breakthrough speed was enough to make the entire 12 universes fall into a state of shock. Lin Yu had just broken through to the ancestor realm not long ago. Moreover, everyone knew that Lin Yu was in the flawless ancestor realm. While he was powerful, every breakthrough was much more difficult than others. This was enough to show how great the fortune of these 9 ancient words was to Lin Yu. This was enough to shock everyone. The first ancient word had been completely grasped by Lin Yu. At the same time, Lin Yu was slightly surprised in his heart. He seemed to know that the first ancient word seemed to have a different effect. Now, his innate divine instinct had become incomparably powerful, and even under the reflection of the first ancient word, he could foresee many things. Even a corner of the future appeared in his heart. This kind of feeling was common among cultivators of a higher realm. However, Lin Yu, who had mastered the first ancient character, had never felt it as deeply as he did now. Is this the effect of grasping the first ancient word? Lin Yu muttered. The mystery contained in each ancient word was different. If Lin Yu refined all the ancient words here, it was unknown what changes would happen to his body. Chapter 1222. These 9 ancient characters have different functions. Now, I can predict the future in advance. However, there's a limit. Maybe it's because I've only refined one ancient character. Lin Yu thought so. At this moment, Lin Yu had dodged the attack of a creature with a sidestep. He had already sensed the attack when he was talking. However, Lin Yu dodged it effortlessly when it was about to hit him. This will be a great advantage in the battle. Lin Yu nodded slowly. His body had undergone a strange change that he didn't even know about. It seemed to be brought about by the first ancient character. The first ancient character that was branded in his sea of consciousness had already disappeared from his sea of consciousness and merged with his body. As he raised his hand, an ancient character appeared in his palm. It was filled with boundless profoundness. Then, he killed the indescribable creature directly. The power of the ancient character had surpassed Lin Yu's previous skills. It carried endless mysteries. Moreover, the first ancient character that Lin Yu had mastered didn't seem to be a killing character. The Taoist laws on it contained a supreme intent. It had an obvious suppressive effect on the indescribable creatures in this place. Lin Yu kept moving forward. He was extremely lonely. At this moment, he was a lone traveler. This world, which wasn't weaker than a universe, had been destroyed long ago. Lin Yu was like the only living being who had survived. While he was comprehending the Tao laws, he was also reconstructing them. Lin Yu was comprehending the essence of it. He wanted to build a solid foundation for the original God realm. More than 10 years had passed. Lin Yu finally reached the deepest place. The world was vast. An ancient altar appeared here. What was placed on top of it was the complete earthenware jar. Below the altar, several supreme creatures were sitting cross-legged. However, some of them had lost their eyeballs or their limbs. Their bodies had mutated to a certain extent, which made them look terrifying. However, they seemed to have been dead for countless years. At this moment, only a corner of the truth was revealed. Who would have thought that there would be so many supreme living beings guarding this clay pot back in the day? Lin Yu exhaled deeply and sighed. He had learned from Chun Shishir that the clay jar was extremely important. The true blood of these creatures should be on top of the broken urn. Lin Yu couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity as he looked at the supreme, living being who had been protecting the clay jar all this while. These were all heroes from before ancient history. They had made unimaginable sacrifices in order to protect the universe. Not even the slightest bit of true spirit was left behind, to the extent that it had already been forgotten by later generations. Not even a name was left behind. At this point, Lin Yu could be considered to have passed the test. At the same time, he had also obtained great benefits. Lin Yu bowed to the few supreme beings before arriving at the bottom of the altar. At the same time, he stretched out his palm. Suddenly, there was a different feeling in the depths of his heart. He looked at one of the supreme beings who was dressed in a white robe. Although he had already lost his body and looked like a piece of wood, even his head had been broken and black blood was constantly flowing out. However, Lin Yu had some kind of special connection with him. It was as if the two of them came from the same source. At this moment, the suppressed king of gods token also began to vibrate, as if it had sensed a familiar person. Lin Yu's heart was filled with doubts. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. This supreme being came from the 12 universes, or perhaps doubts arose in Lin Yu's heart. He suddenly thought of the term reincarnator. Could it be that his background was far more than just the son of the old king of gods? Could it be that his arrival on Earth was not a coincidence? Could it be that he was really a supreme being who had appeared in the reincarnation cycle? Thinking of this, Lin Yu couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. However, the true spirits of the few supreme beings here had obviously dissipated. The body of the headless being was 70% similar to Lin Yu's. Moreover, their auras were also connected. This was also one of the reasons why Lin Yu began to have doubts. Looking at the headless being, Lin Yu actually had a feeling that he was going to sacrifice himself. And this feeling seemed to be irreversible. At this moment, the King of Gods token had also lost its effect. The world here was vast, and there was only a ray of light at the end of the horizon. Lin Yu couldn't even show his cultivation base now, and his body was constantly dissipating. It was as if he was going to sacrifice himself to awaken the headless being. Lin Yu's current strength couldn't do anything under this guidance. Just as Lin Yu's body was about to disappear, the people outside suddenly had a bad feeling in their hearts. I feel like there's something that I'm about to forget, but I can't remember it. 10 Square World's second palace master's eyes were filled with doubts. Only the Yuqing goddess stood up. She had a deep understanding of this feeling. It was when the six-winged deity king was about to kill Lin Yu completely. Through the extreme evil origin, it could wipe out the existence of all living beings. Lin Yu is in danger. The Yuqing goddess wanted to call out Lin Yu's name. However, she realized that she couldn't do it anymore. Even Lin Yu's face had disappeared from her mind. At this critical moment, Lin Yu's body had already started to dissipate between the heaven and earth. Just as he was about to enter the headless being's body, Chun Shirshir seemed to have sensed this change and suddenly opened her eyes. Lin Yu. This sentence woke her up from her dream. The Yuqing goddess looked at Chun Shirshir in surprise. At this moment, Chun Shirshir had already started to fuse with the memories of her reincarnation on Earth. In the previous era, Lin Yu had crossed paths with her. At this moment, she could already sense that Lin Yu's existence was about to disappear completely. Chun Shirshir's eyes gradually turned cold, and she regained her supremacy. He's not you. Have you lost your way? Chun Shirshir took a step forward and came before the broken clay pot. With a soft shout, everyone was jolted awake from their dreams. This cold voice passed through the clay pot and entered the world within. The voice was transmitted very quickly. At this moment, the headless being's body trembled. It seemed to have sensed Chun Shirshir's aura. His aura was forcefully suppressed by himself. At this moment, this headless being seemed to have his own consciousness. After sensing Lin Yu's figure, he forcefully peeled the true spirit that he had obtained from Lin Yu out of his body and returned it to Lin Yu. At this moment, Lin Yu woke up. At the same time, beads of cold sweat could not help but seep out of his forehead. The scene that happened just now was beyond his imagination. It was as though he did not have any strength to fight back at all. Everything happened way too quickly. Everything was out of his expectations. Lin Yu looked at the headless being. He could clearly sense that after his true spirit was returned, he let out a heartened expression. Thereafter, all auras dissipated, and the heaven and earth returned to silence once more. Lin Yu cast a glance at that headless utmost being. However, the bewilderment in his eyes did not dissipate away. Lin Yu did not waste any more time. From Chun Shirshir's shout, he could tell that something big had happened to the utmost being here. There was no guarantee that if he were to continue staying here, something would happen. At the thought of this, Lin Yu stepped onto the sacrificial altar. His fingers began to touch the illusory figure of the clay pot. This was the weapon spirit of the clay pot. It was the most important existence here. Upon catching sight of Lin Yu, the weapon spirit of the clay pot did not seem to resist. Instead, it entered Lin Yu's consciousness directly. However, if he wanted to cultivate it, he would need a large amount of time to fully grasp it. After all, Lin Yu's cultivation state was still way too weak for the clay pot. Chapter 1223. After taking control of the weapon spirit of the clay pot, the corpses of the few utmost beings began to dissipate gradually. It was as though they had completed their mission. Lin Yu closed his eyes. His figure gradually appeared from the clay pot. Lin Yu boss, the Yuqing goddess, Lin Zhanyu, and the others revealed looks of joy. At this moment, the true blood on the clay pot began to dissipate as well, entering Chun Shirshir's body. The broken clay pot appeared within Lin Yu's body. Thank you. Lin Yu cupped his fists and thanked Chun Shirshir sincerely. If not for Chun Shirshir's words at the crucial moment to awaken the headless utmost being, he might have died in there, and his true spirit would have dissipated completely. After absorbing the true blood of the few utmost beings, the aura on Chun Shirshir's body began to dissipate gradually. A smile appeared on Chun Shirshir's face. Old deskmate, long time no see. Lin Yu was not surprised at all that Chun Shirshir had awakened the memories of the previous era. He merely replied, "Old classmate." After obtaining the clay pot, Lin Yu and the others came out of the ancient well. Chen Shishir fell into a deep slumber once more. After obtaining the broken clay pot, Lin Yu said that the benefits he had obtained were immense. The aura on his body was getting more and more mysterious. By now, no one could see through it. Everyone knew that Lin Yu's true cultivation state had broken through once more. The second palace master of the Ten Direction world could not help but be speechless. Not long ago, Lin Yu's cultivation state was almost the same as hers. But now, she was way too far behind. When she looked at Lin Yu again, she could only look up at him. Outside the ancient well, the old master of the Zhao family could not see them. He was hopping on top of the ancient well. After all, it had been a few years since they came to the immortal island. Just the time in the ancient well alone was 3 years. And after Chen Shishir went down, there was no news of her at all. The old master of the Zhao family doted on Chen Shishir excessively. Over the past few years, he had not been able to eat or drink, so his cultivation had not improved by much. The children guarding the immortal island gradually revealed anxious expressions. Fortunately, Lin Yu and the others returned safely. "What's wrong with Shishir?" The Zhao family's old ancestor looked at the unconscious Chen Shishir with a worried expression. "It's still in the process of awakening. It's not a big deal." Patriarch Lu explained. Hearing Ancestor Lu's words, the Zhao family's ancestor had a look of disappointment and joy on his face. He was happy because Chen Shishir's future was limitless. However, he was worried because when Chen Shishir really awakened, he would still have his current memories. This was because Chen Shishir had given him a very different feeling during his recovery a few years ago. "I will remember," Lin Yu said slowly. The awakening of a samsara traveler was a fusion of the memories of several eras. Through this, they would become stronger and would not easily abandon a certain memory. After hearing Lin Yu's explanation, the old ancestor of the Zhao family felt slightly relieved. They returned to the thatched hut. Now, there's still the abbot and the immortal island of Penglai. The fragments of the pottery jar should still be there. Lin Yu thought. After he got the pottery jar, he had already sensed it in his heart. On this earth, there were the auras of other fragments. If he wanted to make the best use of the pottery jar in the final black calamity, he had to make it complete. The 300 children I brought back then are now on the other 2 immortal islands, Su Fu said. Back then, he had already found the 3 immortal islands. However, at the end of the last era, the world began to settle, and he had not been in contact with them for a long time. He did not know when the children had escaped the settlement. Lin Yu nodded. If that was the case, things would be much easier. After a simple rest for a few days, they began to go to the next place, the abbot. They sailed to the abbot. The distance between the 3 immortal islands was not very big. Therefore, it only took them 2 days to reach the abbot. They saw a piece of rock exposed to the outside, like an immortal lying down. Lin Yu opened his eyes and said, "It seems that something has happened to the abbot." Through the first ancient character that he comprehended, he had foreseen some kind of danger in advance. There was a strange aura in the immortal fog. The restriction here was not completely closed, and there was a crack. After hearing Lin Yu's words, Su Fu's expression became serious, and he muttered to himself, could it be that they did not escape the settlement of the last era? He thought that was impossible. Back then, these children had not even started to cultivate at all. Moreover, this place was protected by the immortal island's Tao law, so there should not be any problems. However, when he saw the crack, he already had a bad feeling in his heart. There was an aura of death in it. One could even see the piles of white bones on the ground. Lin Yu and the others came out of the crack. With the ancient token in Su Fu's hand, they easily entered. The immortal island of Fangzhong was surrounded by immortal fog outside, but after entering, it was a different scene. They could see corpses everywhere, either hanging on the rocks or lying on the ground, and the blood was emitting a foul smell. There was no aura of the heavenly tribulation here. This made the expressions of Lin Yu and the others become more and more serious. In particular, Lin Yu knew that there seemed to be the corpses of the supreme beings in the broken artifacts. An unimaginable accident had happened. The Fangzhong Immortal Island did not cause the extinction of living beings because of the settlement of the Earth's reincarnation. Lin Yu made a deduction based on the first ancient character that he comprehended. Up ahead, Lin Yu said indifferently, several thousand years had passed. The children that Su Fu brought here had developed very well on the Immortal Island. There were thousands of corpses here. There were even babies in swaddling clothes. This made Su Fu's heart ache. Back then, he brought these children to the Immortal Island in order to preserve the bloodline of the previous era. But he did not expect that such a tragic situation would happen now. Lin Yu had foreseen the danger from his deduction. Soon, they would be attacked by a living being. Moreover, he could not see the specific appearance of the attacker. At this point, Lin Yu was sure that this definitely had a lot to do with the ancient well that contained the broken pottery jar. Because the ancient characters that he mastered could not be deduced, the specific appearance of that living being seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. However, he was sure that the cultivation of that living being was not as high as he imagined. It was because of the existence of this living being that the children here were slaughtered. Su Fu's eyes were filled with pity. Come to think of it, the people here were all brought up by him. But now such a thing had happened. No matter who it is, I will kill it, Su Fu said slowly. Murderous intent gradually appeared in his eyes. Thousands of years of cultivation made it difficult for him to calm down. The few of them made preparations and began to move forward. They stepped over a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The dark clouds were bleak, and the color of this place was gradually replaced by scarlet. One could see that there was a throne on the mountain that was piled up with white bones, and there was a person on it with a pale face. He was neither a human nor a ghost. Master, you're finally here. That person stuck out his tongue in an indescribably evil manner. Little Luo, Su Fu could not believe it. The person who massacred the Immortal Island was also one of the children who were once children. Why did you do this? Your descendants are among them. Su Fu calmed down and questioned the person on the throne. Why? This is fun. The person called Little Luo had obviously lost his mind. Chapter 1224. Su Fu sighed. The aura on his body gradually grew stronger, and he vaguely reached the Emperor realm. It carried a unique Tao law that belonged to the Immortal Island. It completely dissipated the haze here. Master, you've grown old, the person by the name of Little Luo said in an understated manner. As he stood up, the smell of blood began to surge. It caused the entire earth to start shaking. The smell of blood, mixed with the resentment of everyone here, formed a dragon that was thousands of feet long and directly attacked Su Fu. This was a power that surpassed the Spirit King realm. At this time, Little Luo had reached the peak of the Emperor realm. This was the limit of the power that the earth could contain. If he came out, the entire earth would not be able to restrain him. And for some reason, he did not get punished. Su Fu's expression changed drastically, and he kept retreating. Lin Yu took a step forward and stabilized Su Fu's retreating figure. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he directly shattered the resentment dragon. I'm the strongest person on Earth now. Who are you? Little Luo was slightly surprised. He looked at Lin Yu, then at Su Fu, and suddenly realized something. He laughed heartily and said, I know now. So you're the person the founding emperor spoke of. No wonder that old bastard brought you here. Ha ha ha. Old thing, you didn't tell me the secret of the ancient well back then. Now that I've got it, you're no longer valuable. At the end of this era, I'll dominate the world, rule the entire earth, and fight my way into the universe. In the face of Little Luo's presumptuous laughter, Ancestor Lu and the others did not laugh. If this person had really mastered the supreme, strange power in the ancient well, his cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds after he left the earth. No one could stop him. Su Fu said with a pained expression, It's not that I didn't tell you, but you can't control this power. Cut the crap. You just don't think I'm qualified, Little Luo said sternly. Today, I'll kill this variable. Let's see what else you have to say. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in little Luo's eyes. It was because of this obsession that he had been used after entering the ancient well. Right now, no one knew whether he was the disciple of Su Fu or the utmost being who had a huge problem. His eyes were filled with indifference. He looked at Su Fu's helpless expression. Lin Yu put behind him. He can no longer recover, Lin Yu said slowly. He had already sensed that there was another aura within the spirit consciousness of this person called Luo. This was similar to the utmost beings that he had sensed back in the clay pot world. However, they did not belong to any one of them. Back then, in order to defend against the Black Calamity, the utmost being's true spirit was destroyed, and he was tainted with a huge amount of trouble as well. Even now, it still hadn't been completely eliminated. Now, after a long time had passed, someone had broken the seal ahead of time and released it. Looking at Luo's figure, the faces of Ancestor Lu and the others became grave. This person's aura was vast and mighty. Right now, Chen Shishir was in a deep sleep in Yingzhou. It would be difficult for her to wake up anytime soon. Right now, the only person who could fight against Luo was Lin Yu. Su Fu sighed softly. His eyes were filled with sadness. Since that's the case, let's kill him. After saying this, Su Fu seemed to have aged a few hundred years. The Fangzhong Immortal Island had already fallen. Penlai wouldn't be much better off. The flame of the previous era might have already been extinguished. Old thing, are you joking? Luo seemed to have heard a joke. Right now, he had already lost his mind. From what he could sense, he was already the strongest person on Earth right now. He was a peak-level Emperor Realm expert. Furthermore, the Tao laws of Earth were no longer of much use to him. In the entire Earth, who could be his match? Lin Yu didn't say a word. The aura on his body burst out. He was also a peak-level Emperor Realm expert. Moreover, he was an extremely powerful person who had combined 3 essences into one. Even though Lin Yu was still in the Emperor Realm after refining the ancient character, he gave off a very different vibe. There was a sense of supremacy in his aura. As his aura spread out, it seemed as if the power to split the world was constantly appearing around him. It made his body mysterious and dense. It seemed as if the Tao laws of heaven and earth could no longer restrain him. It seems that Lin Yu has already touched the threshold of the original God realm. Ancestor Lu sighed with a deep gaze. Lin Yu's talent shocked even him. At the same time, he also thought that he was worthy of being called a variable by the first emperor. Perhaps Lin Yu would play a crucial role in the final Black Calamity. It's just a supreme being. It's not undefeatable. Lin Yu carried an invincible belief. When Luo saw Lin Yu, his expression finally became serious. You've comprehended an ancient character? He now had the memories of a supreme being. He knew the terrifying effects of the ancient character. When he saw Lin Yu's aura and the ancient character's aura, how could he not be shocked? Moreover, the clay jar was now in Lin Yu's body. It had a natural restraining effect on the power Luo grasped. The power you're relying on is nothing but a filthy thing. Heaven and earth will not tolerate it. Lin Yu's tone was indifferent. Without waiting for Luo's reply, Lin Yu took a step forward. The power on his body swept across the entire island. Under Lin Yu's power, the haze here was completely swept away. Lin Yu's body emitted endless golden light. This was the power of the ancient character. It could suppress everything. Luo was shocked. He retreated in a flash. Lin Yu had already foreseen his escape route and completely sealed it off. The 8 tribes of the Great Void was used. Azura's figure appeared in the void and slammed down on Luo's escape route. Even the void was exploding. No one doubted that Lin Yu was now an Emperor Realm cultivator. Even some of the saints were inferior to him. Patriarch Lu was also shocked. Only now did they know that Lin Yu had mastered an ancient character. Lin Yu seemed to be able to foresee this in advance. Not only before entering the island, but during the battle, Lin Yu had been very calm from the beginning to the end, as if everything was under his control. Boom! Cracks that were difficult to repair appeared in the void. Luo was slammed down, his body cracked. However, the power in little Luo's body was very strange. It seemed to recover in an instant. Lin Yu didn't give Luo the slightest chance. The ancient character's power quickly suppressed him. Lin Yu knew that Luo possessed the power of a supreme mutation. Other attacks would have little effect on him. Only the ancient character's supreme power could suppress him. Impossible! Luo howled in indignation. His body began to emit a terrifying and strange power that could corrupt everything in the world. As it appeared, Lin Yu said faintly, "Leave the island." Lin Yu could resist this power with the ancient character, but to avoid any accidents, he had Patriarch Lu and the others leave the island first. Once he'd completely suppressed Luo, this was Lin Yu's most difficult battle since coming to Earth. It was also the first time he'd encountered a peak Emperor Realm cultivator. If Lin Yu had first arrived on Earth, he might have found it troublesome. But now it was no longer the same. Lin Yu's aura gradually blazed. 9 ancient characters appeared at the same time in Lin Yu's hand. Combined with the power of his cultivation, they continuously carved in the void. The moment the 9 characters appeared at the same time, it was as if 9 primordial suns had risen above the Fangzhong immortal island, enveloping everything and purifying all evil beings. 2 opposing forces began to tangle with each other. However, it was clear that Lin Yu's power had the upper hand. As Lin Yu waved his hands, the 9 ancient characters formed the phantom of a bronze cauldron. It covered the universe and shook, suppressing Luo within. A majestic power constantly radiated, wanting to completely refine Luo. Chapter 1225. No! Through the seals of the immortal island, Ancestor Lu and the others could sense the howls of little Luo. Their voices were filled with disbelief. The power that Lin Yu wielded was way too strong. Little Luo could not resist at all before he was suppressed. Right now, he was being refined by the copper cauldron formed by the 9 ancient words, purifying the power within his body. "You can't kill me." Even till now, little Luo was still trying to put up a brave front. However, he did not receive any response from Lin Yu at all. The remnant power outside the copper cauldron was forcefully gathered by little Luo, turning into a few gigantic dragons that bolted out at Lin Yu. Lin Yu merely raised his hand casually and removed the power. Let alone the remnant power, even the strongest power that little Luo could muster when he was at his peak state was barely enough to deal with the current Lin Yu. 2 days passed by. The strange power of the immortal island began to dissipate. Little Luo was seated cross-legged within. His eyes had regained their clarity once more. Behind him, several illusory figures of the utmost beings appeared. They brought with them an unparalleled might that sent shivers down one's spine. However, they did not launch any attacks at Lin Yu. After the strange power was purified by Lin Yu's ancient words, they had regained their sanity. Their fragmented consciousnesses cupped their fists towards Lin Yu. This was the highest form of etiquette of the utmost beings. It represented that they had completely acknowledged Lin Yu. Within the 12 universes, a supreme being has appeared. Indeed, the variable was born from the 12 universes. You are just like that person. The few illusory figures of the utmost beings gathered all their powers into one person and spoke these words. Through the passage of time, when Lin Yu heard these words, his face did not change. He was just guessing what the person that the utmost beings were talking about had to do with him. However, that was no longer important. Looking at the strange aura of the immortal island being purified completely, Ancestor Lu and the others entered the immortal island once more. Sufu looked at the figure of little Luo, who was trapped within the copper cauldron, and sighed out. Xiao Luo turned back into a fair and clean young man. His eyes were pure and flawless, like the water of a lake. Little Luo was the one with the highest aptitude among all of the people that Su Fu had brought with him. It was just that he had gone astray in the end. Otherwise, Su Fu would have definitely taught little Luo everything he had learned in his lifetime. Time could not be reversed. Little Luo had been completely contaminated. Now that the strange power had faded from his body, it would be difficult for him to stay in this world for long. "Master, I've let you down. I've let my fellow disciples down. Little Luo rose to his feet and bowed deeply to Su Fu. He looked at the mountains of corpses and seas of blood around him. His eyes were filled with self-blame. He was once a bright and clean young man, but in the end, he went astray. After kowtowing 3 times to Su Fu, little Luo looked in the direction of the corpses of his fellow disciples and began to disintegrate. He deeply blamed himself for Su Fu and his fellow disciples. Even the relatives and descendants of his senior and junior brothers had died at his hands. Not a single bloodline remained. Su Fu looked at little Luo, who committed suicide, then turned his head away and did not look at him again. Little Luo could have died in a few days. But now, he was too ashamed to face this dilapidated immortal island. Su Fu did not stop him, until little Luo completely dissipated. He bowed slightly to Lin Yu and said, "Thank you." Lin Yu nodded slightly. Little Luo was not a bad person, but he was captured by the supreme power. Speaking of which, he was also a sad person. After everything calmed down, Su Fu descended on the place where little Luo disappeared and set up a cenotaph. "Thank you." Su Fu cupped his hands to Lin Yu. Su Fu did not have the slightest resentment in his heart that Lin Yu killed little Luo. After all, little Luo had completely lost his mind. Even if Lin Yu did not kill him, he would be a great disaster to the entire Earth. After calming down, Su Fu led Lin Yu and the others to the ancient well on the Fangzhong Immortal Island. Su Fu was guarding the most important Ningzhou. The ancient well here did not have the suppression of the ancient characters. This was also the main reason why little Luo could enter it. However, what Su Fu did not expect was that he underestimated the temptation of the ancient well. Now that he thought about it, it was not only the Fangzhong Immortal Island, but also Penglai Immortal Island. A strange aura was emitted from the ancient well. "You guys wait for me here." Lin Yu looked at the ancient well that was emitting a strange aura. He knew that something must have happened in the ancient well. It was very likely that even he would not be able to protect himself. Therefore, he asked the others to guard above the ancient well while he went down alone. A few of them nodded. Indeed, the current situation was no longer something that they could control. If they went in with Lin Yu, they would probably only be a burden. Lin Yu did not hesitate at all and directly entered the ancient well. The strange aura in this place had almost turned into substance. However, it was still inferior to the supreme being that Lin Yu saw in the pottery jar world. The 9 ancient characters appeared beside Lin Yu and protected his body. At the same time, the power of the God King's token was also emitted at all times, warning him of any changes. Lin Yu remained calm. The strange aura here turned into a cold wind. One could see that it seemed to reflect the great battle in ancient history. However, it was strange, making it difficult to understand. Although the strange aura here was strong, Lin Yu still entered it safely. It was scary but not dangerous. In the depths, the strange aura here had become very dense. Lin Yu had already held the Emperor's sword in his hand. The black fog here could conceal one's consciousness. The power of the origin ancient character was still there. Lin Yu saw something. He dodged the attack. The ground where he was standing exploded. It left behind a strange power that could corrode everything. If Lin Yu did not master the origin ancient character, he might have died in this attack. He would have to use the power of the God King's token to reverse time. After dodging, Lin Yu's body did not stop at all. He locked on to a direction. He thrust out his sword and illuminated the area. In the light, there was a statue. It was indescribable, and he did not know what kind of living being it was. After seeing it, a strange feeling came over him. This was formed by the strange aura. Now, it had turned into a solid statue, and there were signs of it taking shape. Just what in the world did the utmost being meet with back then? Even he himself was met with a calamity. Lin Yu stared at the clay statue and fell into doubt. He knew that the current state of Earth was greatly related to the Black Calamity. However, even the utmost being back then, who had surpassed the original God realm and came from a higher realm, could not resist this strange power. That Black Calamity was really unimaginably terrifying. Perhaps no living being could resist it. Its true origin could no longer be investigated. Only after reaching a certain realm would one be able to understand everything. Lin Yu was not anxious. The most important thing now was to hold the mysterious item that could suppress the black calamity in his hands. The only way was to raise his cultivation base. Lin Yu faced the clay statue. It blocked Lin Yu's path. The clay statue was holding a broken piece of the clay pot in its hand. It was emitting a supreme aura. It formed a delicate balance with the clay statue. Back then, when the utmost being obtained the clay pot and returned to the universe, he brought this strange aura back to Earth. This resulted in its current appearance. It was a pity that the clay pot was destroyed in the Great Battle. Otherwise, those utmost beings would not have died and could have suppressed themselves. He knew that the clay pot contained a mysterious item that could suppress the strange aura. With his current strength, it was hard for him to fight against this strange aura. Therefore, he was using the mighty power of the broken clay pot in his body. The entire ancient well began to shake and fall. The clay statue seemed to have sensed the aura of the other fragments of the clay pot and showed signs of recovery. He stretched out his palm and reached out towards Lin Yu. Time and space were being destroyed inch by inch. It was too terrifying. This method had already surpassed the limits of heaven and earth. Chapter 12:26. Lin Yu wasn't anxious. In his eyes, the vicissitudes of life suddenly exploded. As if he had seen through everything, he was very indifferent, looking down on the world. At this time, Lin Yu was like a real god, not showing the slightest emotion. The power of the pottery jar began to surround him, although it didn't have much effect on increasing combat strength. But it had a great suppressive effect on this strange aura. Under the illumination of the pottery jar, black smoke began to appear on the arm of the clay sculpture. This was the strange aura being purified and worn down. The clay sculpture seemed to have also sensed that Lin Yu had begun to grasp the aura of the pottery jar. At this time, it retracted its arm. In the blink of an eye, an even more terrifying power erupted. Lin Yu was still too weak now. It was difficult for him to completely grasp the power of the pottery jar. Under the suppression of the clay sculpture, Lin Yu showed signs of being unable to hold on. This isn't your world. Even if you're a dragon, you have to lie down. Lin Yu didn't panic. He directly brought out the main body of the pottery jar, suspending it in the void. The moment the pottery jar appeared, the space-time here began to collapse, as if it couldn't withstand this power. This power was directly transmitted to the outside world. It made Ancestor Lu and the others unable to stand steadily. The strangeness inside is more powerful than I imagined. Ancestor Lu was shocked. He had once traveled to many universes and learned many anecdotes. Naturally, he had some understanding of the origin of the Black Calamity. This substance could devour and pollute everything. It was of a higher level than the source of extreme evil. No creature could resist this power. This was also one of the main reasons why Ancestor Lu wanted to enter the land of origin on the other side of the Realm Sea. He needed to see it with his own eyes to confirm his thoughts. Lin Yu was in it. The power of the God King's decree began to erupt. 9 origin ancient characters appeared in the void, imprinted on the pottery jar. He knew that with his current realm, it was difficult for him to completely grasp the pottery jar. Even if it was only incomplete, it was still very strenuous. Lin Yu could only use the support of the ancient characters to maximize the power of the pottery jar. Azura's shadow appeared at the side. At the same time, Lin Yu's realm was no longer suppressed by the Earth's Tao law under the influence of the clay pot's power. He was restored to his peak state. His cultivation base of the mid-progenitor realm was fully revealed. While the Great Void 8 divisions were unleashed, the overlapping space-time power of the Deity King's token was also gathering. Lin Yu wanted to use his strongest attack. He used the clay jar to completely suppress the clay figurines. The power of Ancestor Realm surged under the ancient well. Even if there were Tao laws protecting this place, even the slightest bit of it would cause a terrifying phenomenon when it reached the outside world. A large crack appeared in the void of Earth. This allowed all living beings on Earth to clearly witness this terrifying scene. Is this the end of the world? The ordinary people on Earth were all kneeling on the ground because of the progenitor realm pressure that Lin Yu was emitting. His entire body was trembling. Sufu also had a bad premonition. An imperial edict appeared in his hand. This was left behind by the first emperor before he left. As he unfolded it, it turned into tens of thousands of feet in the wind. The lines on both sides turned into ancestral dragons, roaring and suppressing the aura of this place. It stabilized Earth. The void was recovering. However, this kind of palpitation still lingered in everyone's hearts. Lin Yu has already channeled his cultivation base with all his might. 10 Direction Realm's second palace master's face was solemn. The power of the progenitor realm had already manifested on Earth. This made them begin to worry about Lin Yu's situation under the ancient well. Lin Yu, who was below the ancient well, condensed the overlapping space-time power in his hand. He used the power of the clay pot to suppress the clay figurines, forming a temporary suppression. Lin Yu was using his strongest move. The power of his divine will, battle physique, and cultivation base all gathered toward the Emperor's sword in his hand. With his current power of the mid-progenitor realm, it was enough to destroy everything. 100 times the power was condensed. He took a step forward, and his chi soared into the sky. Even with the suppression of the ancient well, it still couldn't stop Lin Yu's figure. Boom! Under the protection of the first Emperor's imperial edict, the entire Fangzhong Immortal Island began to collapse. Fortunately, it didn't spread to other places on Earth. With a sword strike, heaven and earth trembled. Lin Yu's figure also began to crack. The power of the God King's order began to spread. The clay figurines that were temporarily suppressed had cracks on their bodies. After all, he wasn't in the land of origin. Here, the strange aura had been infinitely worn down over the years. The fragments of the clay pot in the clay figurine's hands and the true blood on it seemed to have sensed something. When Lin Yu failed, a dazzling radiance burst out. A mighty force was emitted. In Lin Yu's perception, this seemed to be the power that should be emitted by a supreme being. He saw a few supreme auras, whose specific faces couldn't be seen, began to use their strongest moves. They suppressed the clay figurines. After all, the clay figurines were born from their bodies and attached to them. Now, they were suppressed by the clay pot and injured by Lin Yu. The clay figurines were already like candles in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. The true blood of the supreme powerhouses was reflected at this moment, but it was only a sure kill attack. As the phantoms of the supreme powerhouses appeared, the river of time was being cut off. Powerhouses of this level had already transcended the world and stood at the end of time. With a raise of their hands, they could shatter the Tao laws. Under the protection of the clay pot and the God King's order, Lin Yu began to retreat. The supreme power spread out. He had already done everything that he should do. The rest would naturally be resolved by them. This was a kind of karma and fate. Perhaps the existence of these true blood was to suppress the clay figurines that were born. This place had already been enveloped by the supreme power. It became undetectable. Lin Yu could only see the river of time collapsing. Ancient history was long. It was as if this place had turned into the only one in the world. He could vaguely see a few majestic figures reaching out their palms at the same time. The clay figurines below began to crack inch by inch. They guided the power of the clay pot down, wanting to completely destroy this strange power. Everything seemed to have happened for tens of thousands of years, but also seemed to have only existed for an instant. In between eternity and an instant, the clay figurines were completely destroyed. The supreme aura dissipated. Everything that happened here seemed to have never happened. Even Ancestor Lu and the others who were outside the ancient well felt that some kind of memory in their minds had been cut off. They couldn't remember anything. Only Lin Yu, who had the clay pot and the God King's order, knew what had happened just now. After the clay figurines were destroyed, the broken clay pot fragments merged with the base and appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. After obtaining the clay pot fragments, Lin Yu wasn't happy because there seemed to be a long way to go before the clay pot was completely repaired. This was just a small part of the clay pot. Immediately after, Lin Yu removed all the remaining strange auras here before returning to the surface. Chapter 1227. What worried Lin Yu was that the fragments of the pottery jar here were only a small part of the original pottery jar. If there was only one fragment in the last Penglai Immortal Island, the other parts would be extremely difficult to find. This was because in the historical records, there was no mention of pottery pots at all. No one knew where it was lost. Perhaps it would be difficult to find it even in heaven and earth. Lin Yu walked out of the ancient well. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They did not waste any time and directly entered and exited the Fangzhong Immortal Island. Su Fu led the way. After Xiao Luo's death, there was obviously a sense of melancholy in his heart. He was worried if the Penglai Immortal Island was the same. After the first cycle of reincarnation, there seemed to be a huge problem that caused the strange substance in the ancient well to begin to recover. Because Su Fu was injured and had the decree of the first emperor, he was able to resist the temptation. A few days later, at the location of the Penglai Immortal Island, this place was already very different from the Immortal Island in Su Fu's memory. The black mist here rose into the sky. Even without the restriction of the Immortal Island, one could still clearly sense it. There was a scarlet color in the black mist. Su Fu sighed slightly and said, "If my disciple has fallen into the darkness, please kill him on the spot. Don't hold back at all." Lin Yu nodded slightly, because by now, if Su Fu's disciple had been contaminated, it was irreversible. That strange substance could invade the origin of people. Earth had been reincarnated for an era. Under the passage of time, Su Fu's disciple had been completely contaminated and fallen into the abyss. As the restriction of the Penglai Immortal Island slowly opened, the strange aura here was even stronger than that of the Fangzhong Immortal Island. It was almost impossible to dissolve and had turned into a substance. One could see that the strange substance here seemed to have been deliberately planted by someone, like planting crops. Every corpse that died tragically had a strong, strange substance in it. It was produced from the 7 orifices and kept disappearing into the void. If it were not for the supreme restriction here, perhaps the strange substance would have already reached the outside world and caused an irreversible impact. This strange substance could devour and assimilate the energy between heaven and earth. The impact on the entire universe was extremely far-reaching. It was because this assimilation and devouring was like a living being absorbing this strange substance. It was irreversible. As long as a little of it was devoured, there would be less of it between heaven and earth. Even if you remove this substance, what is assimilated and swallowed by it can no longer be turned into energy substances. They arrived at the Penglai Immortal Island. This place had already been completely submerged by the black fog. Under this black fog, even one's consciousness could be concealed. When they sensed the auras of Lin Yu and the others, they began to surge wildly. It was as if they already possessed intelligence. He wanted to assimilate everything other than himself. The aura of the ancient characters on Lin Yu's body erupted, completely isolating the black fog. They continued to move forward. There's no aura of living creatures. Only Lin Yu's divine sense could sense the path ahead. Since Ancestor Lu had imprinted half an ancient character, it wouldn't affect him much. It was just that after reaching the depths, Ancestor Lu also gradually could not hold on. If it weren't for Lin Yu's protection, they might not have been able to reach this place. To think that the first universe has already been contaminated by this substance. Ancestor Lu was worried. This substance should have been suppressed on the other side of the realm sea by the utmost beings in ancient history after making a huge sacrifice. But there was always a flaw. The bodies of the deceased utmost beings had brought back this substance. Now that countless eras had passed, these strange substances were already showing signs of sprouting. If Lin Yu and the others had arrived a little later, perhaps the seals on the immortal island would have been broken by these strange substances. When that time came, these strange substances would truly appear in the first universe. No one would have the ability to stop them. Even now, only Lin Yu had the ability to eliminate these strange substances. This seemed to be a certainty. The first emperor had his own plans. He knew that Lin Yu would return to Earth one day. Therefore, after awakening, he did not eliminate the hidden dangers here immediately. Of course, there might be one possibility. After the first emperor awakened, he no longer had time to stay on Earth. In an unknown place, there was still something very important to do. And what worried the first emperor was, as a reincarnator, he had participated in the battle before ancient history. There was only one possibility, and that was that the first emperor had already entered the final destination through a special ancient path and had already gone to suppress the Black Calamity. But no matter which possibility it was, the current Lin Yu couldn't possibly allow the strange substances here to develop as they pleased. The strange substances here seemed to have also sensed that Lin Yu had a power that made its heart palpitate. Vaguely, it already felt threatened. The corpses here began to tremble. Scarlet black fog began to spread out from their 7 orifices. In front of them, it began to slowly gather. This made Su Fu's face filled with anger. The corpses here were all his disciples. In other words, they were the young boys and girls who had been brought here in the previous era. But now, they had all turned into corpses and become nourishment for the strange substances. This was something that he could not accept. Looking at the sky, the black fog continued to gather. Without waiting for Lin Yu to make a move, Su Fu had already taken out the first emperor's decree in his hand. Amidst thousands of rays of golden light, there seemed to be the voice of the ancestral dragon roaring with endless majesty. From this voice alone, one could feel their hearts palpitating. That supreme pressure was enough to make one kneel down and worship him devoutly. This was the second time he sensed the aura of the decree. The power of Lin Yu's divine sense was no longer the same as before, but he could still feel the endless pressure on the decree left behind by the first emperor. The first emperor's realm was already unimaginable. He was definitely on the path of cultivation. It was already difficult for Lin Yu and the others to guess. The aura of the ancestral dragon was emitted from the decree. The void was rumbling and shaking violently. Thousands of rays of golden light burst forth, and auspicious clouds began to pour over the Penglai immortal island. At this moment, the black fog here actually showed fear and began to flow backward like the tide. There was the aura of the origin ancient words on the decree. That was the first emperor's control. Lin Yu looked at the decree and had a different feeling in his heart. In heaven and earth, the effects of the origin ancient words that every living being mastered were different. The aura that it gave off was naturally the same. From the ancient words that the first emperor mastered, one could sense that it contained endless majesty. It was as if as long as the first emperor's aura appeared, there was no need to doubt that he was the master of heaven and earth. All living beings had to bow down and worship him. Wherever his aura reached, it would be the land of the king. It was this aura that made the black fog begin to retreat. It was different from the ancient words or pottery that Lin Yu mastered, which had a natural restraining effect on strange substances. The first emperor's decree used absolute power to suppress the black fog and instill fear in it. The black fog dissipated, revealing the devastated immortal island. Not a single blade of grass grew here. There were only drops of deadwood and other things. Everything that had the power of life no longer existed. Not even a single trace was left. One could only see a small black river gathering on the ground and flowing silently into the void. It kept gathering in the direction of the ancient well. Chapter 12:28. The ancient well seemed to have been completely corroded, becoming extremely dilapidated. Only the base remained. The illusory image of the 3 ancient characters became extremely blurry. Lin, you could clearly sense that the three ancient characters on it were exactly the same as the ones he had. It was one of the 9 ancient characters that he had imprinted. However, the aura of the ancient characters here had become very weak. It wouldn't be long before it was completely corroded by the strange substance. When that time came, the restriction on the immortal island would disappear. The first emperor's decree began to emit endless light. An illusory figure that could crush the heavens appeared in the sky. When Su Fu saw the illusory figure in the black and gold dragon robe, his body trembled. He immediately knelt down and began to worship devoutly. After seeing the illusory figure, Su Fu's body began to tremble. It was the first time he had become so emotional. It had been a long time since he had seen the first emperor's appearance. Now that he was lucky enough to see it in the process of suppressing the strange substance, he was shocked and emotional. His voice trembled as he said, "First Emperor, my master, why didn't you take me away in the previous era? I also wanted to fight with you." He had been guarding Earth for countless years. However, the illusory figure in the sky didn't respond to him. As the first emperor in the sky pointed in the air, a huge illusory figure of the ancestral dragon appeared and roared into the sky. Every single scale on its body seemed to surpass the ancient stars. It was just that it was suppressed on Earth. Under this power, it was enough to shock everyone. When the ancestral dragon's claws fell, almost the entire immortal island with the restriction was about to collapse. The ancestral dragon wanted to completely eliminate the strange substance here with absolute power. The ancient well was trembling violently, and there were endless strange substances in it that began to surge, trying to break through the restriction. In the sky, the first emperor's illusory figure in the sky began to slowly reveal its true form. The first emperor's condition was very strange. Black blood was gradually dripping from his face, and there were also spots of blood on his black dragon robe. He had suffered unimaginable injuries, and his origin had been damaged. That was why his true form was revealed in the illusory figure reflected in the decree. First Emperor. Su Fu couldn't help but turn pale with fright when he saw the state of the first emperor. He muttered to himself, "Impossible, absolutely impossible. Who can harm you? Who has reigned supreme throughout the ages?" Even Ancestor Lu and the others had grave expressions on their faces. The end of the Black Calamity was far more tragic than they had imagined. Even a supreme samsara traveler like the first emperor himself had encountered great problems. The strange substance that already possessed intelligence seemed to have noticed that the first emperor's condition wasn't right. It started to gather all its power and started to crush the ancestral dragon's projection. The entire EC was hit by a huge tsunami. The ground under the sea began to crack inch by inch. The seawater was hundreds of meters high, causing unimaginable damage to the cities along the East Sea. Some cultivators from the Blessed Enclave had already taken action to suppress the huge waves. Lin Yu saw that the situation was not right and took a step forward. He immediately took out the clay jar and the ancient characters. At the same time, Patriarch Lu and the others were protected by the aura of the clay pot. He also arrived in the sky, standing shoulder to shoulder with the first emperor. Lin Yu's eyes were calm. The clay pot in his hands emitted an ancient aura that caused the sky to freeze. Time seemed to be unable to flow here. The aura was extremely terrifying. However, until now, Lin Yu still couldn't completely control the broken clay pot. He could only stand beside the first emperor and suppress the strange substance that was surging here for a short period of time. As for completely destroying it, he still needed the decree left by the first emperor. The dense aura of the clay pot completely enveloped the immortal island. Under the light of the clay pot, the strange substance roared and constantly turned into white smoke. The 9 ancient characters that Lin Yu had imprinted appeared in different positions on the immortal island, guarding everything. Lin Yu didn't allow a trace of the strange substance to escape to the outside world. The space-time here seemed to have been frozen. The 8 projections of the 8 tribes of the Great Void were formed by Lin Yu, each holding an ancient character. Each of them emitted a supreme aura. As for Lin Yu's main body, he was driving the ancient character that he had comprehended in the sky above the immortal island. Everything began to stabilize. At this moment, the first emperor's decree also began to emit endless light. Auspicious clouds were rising, causing the place to gradually reveal a sacred aura. The strange substance here could no longer cause any trouble. Under the suppression of the clay pot, it could only become a turtle in a jar. Under the power of the first emperor's decree, no matter how it struggled, it couldn't have any substantial effect. Lin Yu just looked on indifferently. Not long after, as the strange substance continued to struggle, beads of sweat had already seeped out of his forehead. Obviously, with his current realm, it was still a little difficult for him to control the clay pot. However, with the first emperor's decree, everything seemed to be enough. The strange substance was constantly being worn down. No one knew how much time had passed. The wind and waves above the east sea gradually calmed down. The cultivators guarding the east sea all heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, the knowledgeable cultivators had already begun to gather. They all thought of the reason for the strange phenomena on Earth. Through the fluctuations, they had already guessed that the strange phenomena today were very likely related to the legendary Immortal Islands. The 3 Immortal Islands were the places that all cultivators on Earth dreamed of. Some of the Spirit King Realm cultivators who were nearing the end of their lifespans began to make preparations to enter the East Sea and head in the direction of the fluctuations. As time went by, the intelligence of the strange substance here had already been destroyed by the first emperor's decree. Only a tiny bit of it was left. Lin Yu used the power of the clay pot to completely eliminate this place. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. After Lin Yu calmed his mind, he began to enter the ancient well. This ancient well had become dilapidated under the corrosion of the strange substance and was almost on the verge of collapse. The Tao laws engraved on it had become extremely dim. He reached the deepest part. Under Lin Yu's guidance, a fragment of the clay pot entered his body. By now, the clay pot was almost half repaired. He already possessed unparalleled power. However, there was still a long way to go before the clay pot could be completely repaired. Lin Yu closed his eyes and faintly sensed something in his heart. He was using the power of the ancient word to deduce the location of the other fragments of the clay pot. However, even though he had the ancient word, he could only vaguely sense it. This was also when he was holding a normal clay pot and the power of the ancient word that he could deduce at the same time. There is, but it doesn't seem to be in this space-time anymore. Lin Yu frowned slightly. He wanted to use the power of the God King's order to reverse time, but at every critical point, everything became blurry and impossible to see. The power of the God King's order was not enough to deduce the remaining fragments of the clay pot. However, Lin Yu was not anxious. He knew that the clay pot was too important, and the things involved were extremely shocking. If it could be obtained so easily, perhaps the Supreme would not have died in the battle years ago. The fragments of the clay pot began to slowly merge together. The power of the clay pot seemed to have transcended the scope of Tao. Chapter 1229. At this moment, Lin Yu was like a supreme being who had transcended the universe, overlooking the great Tao. That was the effect of holding the clay pot. At the same time, Lin Yu benefited a lot. His divine will began to gradually strengthen after being strengthened by the clay pot. Even his cultivation base and combat body were gradually becoming stronger under the aura of the clay pot. With the broken clay pot above his head, Lin Yu's aura gradually became stronger. Previously, he had just broken through, but now there were signs of him growing stronger again. The few of them who were outside also sensed the same signs. Patriarch Lu's expression changed. I didn't expect Lin Yu to have surpassed us now. He is now developing to a higher level. Boss is going to become stronger again. Lin Zhanyu was delighted. The strange matter here had been cleared, and Patriarch Lu and the others began to comprehend it. Although the Tao laws of Earth had a suppressive force and were extremely strong, they could cultivate here and gain different insights. After staying here for so long, the Yuchin goddess and the others had made great progress in their cultivation base. Especially when they were on Ingzhou Island, the 9 ancient characters gave them a very strong insight, and they had been digesting it all this time. 10 years passed like this. Time passed, and winter came and went. On the Immortal Island, because of the restriction, the Yaoqi here gradually began to recover, and gradually plants and trees began to grow. Although it was still barren, the Yaoqi here was much more abundant than on Earth, which was in the Dharma ending age. Now that decades had passed, the Yaoqi on Earth had become thinner and thinner, and was almost gone. Earth seemed to be entering the next reincarnation. Found it! At this moment, outside Penglai Immortal Island, someone shouted excitedly. This voice woke Patriarch Lu and the others. There are cultivators from Earth who have found this place. Su Fu looked helpless. Or was it because the activity of cleaning up the strange substances these few times was too great? After so many reincarnations, the Immortal Island had left a token outside. Otherwise, Su Fu and the others would not have been able to find the location of the Immortal Island at that time. Outside Penglai Immortal Island, a Spirit King Realm cultivator took out an ancient token. The ancient token emitted a gentle power that slowly merged into the restriction. The restriction began to dissolve, revealing a passageway. This is the place that cultivators of my generation dream of. There were cultivators whose lifespans were almost exhausted, and tears streamed down their faces as they looked at the scene on the Immortal Island with excitement. The cultivators on the boat were all cultivators who were close to death. They had come here in pursuit of the legend of immortality on Earth. He didn't want to be found by them. Everyone stepped onto the Immortal Island. Sensing the gradually recovering Yao Qi, they felt that their cultivation levels were showing signs of loosening. This is the place. My cultivation base is on the verge of a breakthrough. Some people were excited. Someone frowned slightly at this moment, because the amount of Yao Qi here seemed to be different from what was recorded in the ancient books. Moreover, the vegetation here seemed to have grown in recent years. There was no immortal mist lingering around. He could only sense that the suppression here was weaker than in the outside world. There's a powerful aura ahead. Someone sensed the aura of Lin Yu's breakthrough. Everyone was bewildered. However, driven by curiosity, they still approached this place. Fortunately, the corpses on the ground were no longer there. Otherwise, they would have been scared out of their wits. After a quarter of an hour, the cultivators on Earth had arrived at the ancient well. They saw Patriarch Lu and the others sitting cross-legged around the ancient well. Immortals? Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect that there would be humans here at all. Moreover, Su Fu's aura was very deep and almost undetectable. If Su Fu didn't deliberately show his aura, most of the people here would not be able to withstand the pressure and would have to kneel down because of it. This is not a place for you to come. Leave quickly, Su Fu said slowly. His expression was calm. After all, he didn't know the exact situation in the ancient well. He didn't know if there were any strange substances in it. Everyone's expression changed in the face of Su Fu's dissuasion. Penglai Immortal Island was a place that they had painstakingly pursued for many generations. If they gave up so easily now, wouldn't it be too unreasonable? The dozen or so people here all looked hesitant. They were currently the top cultivators in Huaxia. Even though their cultivation was close to that level, they were still at the peak of the Spirit King realm and had their own pride. They didn't understand why Su Fu wanted to chase them away. Immortal, is there any secret here? Someone asked with a probing tone. For the conversation just now, Su Fu's tone and attitude were still considered mild. That was why that person dared to ask boldly. It's not something that you shouldn't know, Su Fu said casually. Lin Yu was currently in the process of breaking through and was not allowed to be disturbed. His blazing aura was only faintly emitted, but it was enough to make everyone tremble. The dozen or so people who came looked at the ancient well that they were guarding at the same time. They already had other thoughts in their minds. You must have arrived not long ago. Now that you've discovered the treasure in the ancient well, you should be guarding it. One of the people looked at them, and his attitude changed. The old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion had a very strong aura. He was almost breaking through to the Emperor realm. He was only one step away from breaking through, but it was already a natural moat for him, whose lifespan was almost exhausted. Now that he felt the fluctuations in the ancient well, he couldn't care less. At this moment, he had to go forward and take a share of the loot. Seeing that someone had already stepped forward, the rest of the crowd also stepped forward. At the same time, some people had already revealed their killing intent toward Patriarch Lu and the others. They noticed that Su Fu's condition was very strange. Even if he had broken through to the immortal realm, his current cultivation must have fallen. If he wanted to recover, he might have to pay a heavy price. Su Fu looked at one of them with a slightly solemn expression. The old man, who only had a few strands of hair left, gave the impression that he was very powerful and as deep as the sea. He was definitely an Emperor Realm expert, but for some unknown reason, his current condition was very strange. He was almost on the verge of death. The old man had also come here to search for the secret of longevity. At his level, he already knew that the so-called immortal ascension was nothing more than a pipe dream. Even immortals couldn't escape the erosion of Earth's Tao laws. Earth didn't allow Emperor Realm cultivators to exist. Even if one was lucky enough to survive during a breakthrough, one would be crippled. It would be difficult for one's origin to recover. Now, the old man came to the Immortal Island to search for the legendary immortal medicine on the Immortal Island and solve the problem in his body. The old man scanned his surroundings, but he found that the Immortal Island of Penglai had become very barren. He could only see a lot of new plants. There was no trace of the immortal medicine. He began to wonder if it was because Patriarch Lu and the others had entered this place first and plundered everything. Don't you listen to my advice. Su Fu was now in grief and didn't want to cause too much killing. However, after 10 years of searching, the people here were about to go crazy. The temptation of the Immortal Island was too great. Some people hid their killing intent. In their opinion, since Patriarch Lu and the others had arrived here first, they must have taken the opportunity. That thought came to their minds. Among them, someone beside the old man fanned the flames and whispered, "Maybe they've already taken the immortal medicine here. I wonder what other opportunities there are. Why don't we?" Although Patriarch Lu and the others' cultivation levels were suppressed, their divine senses were very sharp. The old man with thinning hair put his hands behind his back and looked at Su Fu with an unfriendly gaze. At this time, he no longer held back and began to release the aura of an Emperor Realm expert. Some people who didn't know what was going on were shocked. They couldn't withstand the pressure and slowly retreated. Chapter 1230. Su Fu also shook his head silently. After all, he was too seriously injured in the last era's reckoning. So much so that he hadn't recovered yet. Moreover, he sensed that there was more than one Emperor Realm expert here. They were all eyeing him covetously. After all, Su Fu's aura was very terrifying. It vaguely gave them a huge pressure. The remaining two Emperor Realm experts didn't dare to expose themselves easily. "Who exactly are you?" The old man stepped forward and slowly asked. He was now the strongest person on Earth. However, under the suppression of Earth, even an Emperor Realm expert could only live for 2,000 to 3,000 years. He broke through in ancient times and hibernated until now. He was already close to death. He was hoping that he could extend his life through the fortune on the Immortal Island. Therefore, he was more or less sure that there should be an opportunity in the ancient well that they were guarding. It was very likely that it was the legendary longevity substance that existed on the Immortal Island. "Who am I?" "You can't imagine," Su Fu said indifferently. The aura on Su Fu's body was like an immortal wind, and his body exuded an ancient aura. "I can be sure that you have the secrets of the Immortal Island," the old man said at this time. His aura erupted completely, like a huge storm that began to sweep over the Immortal Island. "If you get out of the way now, you might still have a chance to live." The old man was very domineering. He had been invincible for so long that he had lost his fear of heaven and earth. Now, except for the Tao law of Earth, in his mind, there was nothing that could suppress him. Even your old man isn't qualified to say those words to me. Su Fu spoke the truth without the slightest hint of anger on his face. These people who came to the Immortal Island all showed unfriendly expressions. Indeed, at their level, they were already invincible on Earth. Now, facing Su Fu, Ancestor Lu, and the others, after a short period of investigation, they could already sense that they were not much of a threat. They were not the legendary immortals who were invincible. Everyone's face was filled with excitement. At this time, the Jade Pure Goddess had already stepped forward. Lin Yu might be at a critical moment in his cultivation and absolutely couldn't be disturbed. In the face of the danger of Lin Yu being disturbed, the Jade Pure Goddess and the others wouldn't agree. Are you all courting death? Lin Zhanyu's temper was extremely fiery. At this moment, he said directly. His body was very strong, and it was affected by his bloodline. Although he was also suppressed on Earth, compared to the Jade Pure Goddess and the others, the suppression was much weaker. As long as he unleashed his full power, even the Emperor Realm cultivators here would have to die. It seems that we have no choice but to act. Two people appeared from the crowd. Their bodies were emitting a decaying aura. They were already half a foot into the ground and could pass away at any moment. Merely, the auras emitted from their bodies were extremely powerful. One of them had even broken through to mid-stage Emperor Realm. It made people feel a huge pressure. You can't protect what's here. Don't make a mistake. The mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator from Earth spoke up. He was dressed in an ancient gray robe. He didn't even have time to shake off the dust on his body. As he spoke, his turbid eyes shone brightly. In an instant, all the rocks here were pierced through. The entire Immortal Island seemed to be shaking. It was a piece of cake for a powerhouse of this level to destroy an island. If it weren't for the protection of the restrictions here, it might have been torn apart and destroyed by the auras of these Emperor Realm cultivators. Lin Zhanyu and the rest revealed a solemn expression. Emperor Realm cultivators weren't invincible, but they all knew that the gap between each realm was like a natural chasm. It was obvious that the mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator had come prepared. He held a forbidden item in his hand. It emitted a power that could destroy everything. Before he made a move, Lin Zhanyu and the others already felt the pain of their divine consciousness. The forbidden item in the man's hand emitted a black light. He wanted to completely wipe out Lin Zhanyu and the others. He wouldn't leave a single chance. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the ancient well. The obsidian aura turned into a storm and began to sweep across the entire Immortal Island. A great opportunity is about to appear. Even a mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator paused at this moment. This level of obsidian aura, even if he didn't use his cultivation method to absorb it, his cultivation was already showing signs of advancing again. His turbid eyes shone brightly. I advise you to leave quickly, or else. The threat in his words was self-evident. For the sake of endless opportunities, he didn't hesitate to use the forbidden item he obtained from the ancient ruins to completely wipe out Su Fu and the others. Don't even think about it, Lin Zhanyu said casually. Blood chi erupted from his body. He wasn't afraid of the mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator. Lin Zhanyu's blood chi was constantly being suppressed by the forbidden item, but it was still difficult to completely erase it. Lin Zhanyu took a step forward. The ground was exploding inch by inch. What a powerful body! Even the expressions of the other two Emperor Realm cultivators on the other side changed slightly. They could clearly sense that Lin Zhanyu's cultivation was only at the Spirit King realm, but the blood chi that soared into the sky had a huge impact on them. Unparalleled talent. The Emperor Realm cultivators had already seen it. Lin Zhanyu wasn't old, but he was already at the peak of the Spirit King realm. They had lived for thousands of years, but they'd never seen someone with such terrifying talent. He has a peerless bloodline in him. The mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator had already guessed something. He continued, suppress him. We can take him back and study him carefully. Maybe we can decipher something from him. The mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator had an idea. He directly activated the forbidden item and crushed it toward Lin Jianyu and the others. "You're very bold." An indifferent voice sounded. The sky changed color. A white-robed figure appeared in the center of the field. It was Lin Yu, who'd just broken out of seclusion. His face was cold and indifferent. As soon as he appeared, the forbidden item in the mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator's hand lost its effect. The black light on it was suppressed and couldn't do anything at all. Everyone turned pale with fright. They never would have thought that Su Fu and the others weren't protecting a fortune, but a supreme expert. This person's aura alone was enough to suppress them. Lin Yu's tall and straight figure gave off a feeling of invincibility. This was absolute pressure. It was more terrifying than anything they'd ever seen in thousands of years. They couldn't see through Lin Yu's cultivation and realm anymore. "Who are you?" The mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. Due to the fact that the forbidden weapon in his hand had been suppressed, even he himself had been injured. Up until now, they hadn't seen Lin Yu make a move. Just the aura emanating from his body was enough to injure him. "I'm the one who's going to take your lives now. Do you want to commit suicide, or do you want me to kill you myself?" Lin Yu's attitude was cold. He'd already heard the mid-stage Emperor Realm cultivator's words from below. Chapter 1231. Lin Jianyu was his little brother. Over the years, they had built a deep relationship. These people not only wanted to kill Ancestor Lu and the others, but they also wanted to capture Lin Jianyu and study his bloodline. "Aren't you being too arrogant?" The middle-stage Emperor Realm expert's expression changed slightly in the face of Lin Yu's arrogant words. He had been invincible on Earth for thousands of years, and no one had dared to speak to him like this. At this moment, he felt that his dignity had been challenged, and his expression became unsightly. "In that case, let me do it myself." Lin Yu didn't seem to take these Emperor Realm experts seriously at all. A single word could decide their life and death. Lin Yu took a step forward. The Emperor's sword in his hand trembled. He used the sword kinesis technique. He didn't use his full strength, but the clouds above the Immortal Island were directly split into several halves. When he was at the bottom of the ancient well, Lin Yu had already fused a few Emperor weapons into the Emperor's sword. He also refined a few ancient characters in a clay pot. The current Emperor sword's grade had already transcended and reached the Ancestor realm. With the ancient characters and the clay pot, the Emperor sword's growth attribute was unimaginable. As Lin Yu continued to refine and comprehend the ancient characters, it would continue to advance. As soon as the Emperor sword appeared, the mountains and rivers changed color. Even though the grade of the Emperor sword had been suppressed, it was still at the peak of the Emperor realm. No one could match it. Even the artifact in the middle stage Emperor realm old man's hand began to wail under the Emperor sword's aura. In the end, it directly exploded. Qi, terrifying sword qi. It swept through everything. One could see that even the Emperor realm experts' bodies began to crack before the Emperor sword approached. This trend was irreversible. No matter how they cried and roared and used their strongest methods, it was difficult to resist. And this was to the extent that Lin Yu didn't use his full strength. He didn't even use his other divine abilities. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere. Peace returned to the Immortal Island. One could see that the vegetation that had grown in recent years was covered in blood and broken bones. These people didn't need to die. However, he should not have wanted to kill Ancestor Lu and the others after coming to the Immortal Island. The Emperor's sword returned to Lin Yu's body and was inserted into the clay jar. After the Emperor's sword had absorbed a few Emperor weapons, it was still transforming continuously. Under the influence of the aura of the clay pot, it showed signs of advancing to a supreme artifact. Now it was beginning to show its power. After killing a few people, Lin Yu's expression didn't change at all. At this time, the items from the 3 Immortal Islands had been taken out. He had completed his mission of coming to Earth. Lin Yu wasn't happy at all, because the jar was not complete. The other fragments were still scattered in unknown places in various universes. Fortunately, Lin Yu was able to sense the other fragments after obtaining 1/3 of the jar. Now the initial coordinates could be determined. With his eyes closed, Lin Yu deduced the location of the other pots. A year passed just like that. A map had formed in Lin Yu's mind. It was incomparably vast and involved the 10 holy lands and the 12 universes. It's been decades since we came to Earth. It's time for us to return. Lin Yu stood up and said slowly. Now that he had obtained the clay pot, Lin Yu's comprehension of the Tao laws was quite deep. He was now on the verge of breaking through to the late stage of the ancestor realm. He needed to spend a certain amount of time to comprehend and think about what to do next. Everyone nodded. Can you take me with you? Su Fu asked calmly. After he opened the emperor's decree, he saw the state of the first emperor. It seemed that he was in a bad state. A big problem had occurred when he was fighting in an unknown place. He hoped that after he was with Lin Yu, he could go to the first emperor's side and fight with him one day in the future. Lin Yu didn't refuse. Su Fu's talent wasn't low. Under the suppression of Earth, he had already reached the peak of the emperor realm in the last reincarnation era. It was just that he was punished later on, causing him to break through. Otherwise, he should have been able to break through to the saint realm or even higher. The few of them embarked on their journey back. The current Qin Shi was already in the initial state of awakening. After staying on the Yingzhou Immortal Island for more than 10 years, she was now in the Emperor realm. However, she wasn't in a hurry to leave Earth. There was still some time before Earth's next reincarnation. She needed to complete the final awakening on Earth. Old classmate, have a safe journey. They arrived at the Chun family. Qin Shi stood outside and said slowly. Now, she had awakened the memories of the previous era. She should have awakened in the last reincarnation, but the first emperor was too powerful and suppressed all the reincarnators. That was why she only began to awaken in this era. According to Qin Shi, she was definitely not the only one on Earth who had begun to awaken. Perhaps this was the most magnificent era. In the last battle, we lost. Many powerhouses left behind a wisp of their true spirit on Earth to prepare to awaken. In this life, we won't have any regrets. Before leaving, Qin Shi recounted the battle in ancient history for the first time, although it was only a mention. But from her words, one could still tell how tragic that battle was. All the supreme beings of that era had fallen, but in the end, they still failed. It was hard to imagine what they were facing. Lin Yu didn't ask in detail. At his current realm, Lin Yu was still too weak. Knowing too many anecdotes would only affect him and make him lose that belief. In the final battle, old classmate, goodbye. Lin Yu said. Lin Yu and the others rode on their flying swords and directly flew into the sky. They flew all the way through the atmosphere. They arrived at Shanhai Pass. Bai Qi was still guarding there. Qin Shi looked at Lin Yu in the distance. Her cold eyes revealed a hint of gentleness. She muttered in a low voice, "He's too similar to you. Sometimes I thought it was you." There was a person in Qin Shi's heart. This person seemed to be very similar to Lin Yu. Even their appearances were exactly the same, not to mention their temperament. After parting with Bai Qi, the few of them embarked on the journey back. After a few years, they returned to the incipient extent. At this time, Su Fu, without the suppression of Earth, began to break through again and again. After Lin used medicinal pills to heal his injuries, he was now standing at the peak of the Emperor realm. The aura of the Saint realm was emitted from his body, and he could break through at any time. After staying in the heavenly court for a while, Lin Yu imparted the ancient characters of origin that he had mastered to Patriarch Lu. Because he knew that Ancestor Lu was preparing to go alone into the Realm Sea to send a message, Lin Yu didn't stop him. He only hoped that Ancestor Lu could survive safely. 5 years passed. Lin Yu sent Ancestor Lu all the way to the Realm Sea. The two of them were speechless, but all the words needed to be said were unspoken. Huge waves were sweeping. In the Realm Sea, a speck of dust was an ancient star. One could see, in the Realm Sea, there were floating bronze bulges. These were lonely tombs left behind by who knew what kind of experts. Eras had passed, and it was already impossible to investigate. A terrifying aura was emitted from them. Even with Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu's current realm, it was difficult for them to approach. Every wave above the realm sea represented an era. The two of them stood on it. Even in the outside world of the realm sea, they were enduring tremendous pressure. Above the vast and boundless realm sea, Lin Yu and ancestor Lu were too insignificant. After spending a year's time, the two of them arrived at the position of the Western sect's sect master. Endless Buddhist Dharma, vast and mighty, formed a huge city wall. Lotus flowers danced on it. It isolated the even greater storm ahead, preventing problems from occurring in the world. The two of them bowed slightly to the Western sect's sect master, the Taoist guide, who was also known as the Buddha. It was just that the current Taoist guide was only left with obsession. In order to suppress the realm sea, and at the same time confirm the coordinates of the predecessor's return, there was no longer any response. "All right, little friend Lin, there's no need to send us off," Ancestor Lu said slightly. He looked at the endless waves ahead, his face carrying disappointment. "Be careful." Lin Yu carried a smile. The two of them stood side by side for a period of time. Ancestor Lu controlled the immortal sword, entering the realm sea. Lin Yu watched for a period of time before turning back. Chapter 1232. Back to the edge of the realm sea. Ten Direction World's second palace master was sobbing uncontrollably. She and Ancestor Lu had only spent a short period of time together. But now, Ancestor Lu had resolutely entered the depths of the realm sea for the sake of all living beings. She didn't know if she was dead or alive, nor did she know the way back. Lin Yu and the others didn't know how to comfort her. Ten Direction World's second palace master and Ancestor Lu had been together for 1,000,000 years. Their parting now might be forever. In the end, I'm still too weak. I want to return to Ten Direction World and cultivate in seclusion. Ten Direction World's second palace master said slowly. Lin Yu nodded. He had left the falsified heaven mark in Ten Direction World, so he could quickly return to that place. They prepared to depart immediately and set off on the way back. Lin Yu could also go and see how Bai Xiaoli was doing now. Then, the figures of those people gradually disappeared. With Lin Yu's current cultivation realm, the falsified heaven mark was no longer the same as before. Even if they were separated by an endless distance, they could still quickly return to Ten Direction World. Ten Direction World. Ever since Bai Xiaoli escaped, the Tao here had gradually become stronger. Ten Direction World's palace masters sensed the powerful aura and came out of seclusion. When they saw Lin Yu and the second palace master, they were overjoyed. They learned from the sacred land master that Bai Xiaoli was still in a deep sleep and didn't know when she would return. Bai Yu stood at the side, her eyes dim. Now, she could only look at Lin Yu's back. She had been chasing after him, but now that Lin Yu had become stronger, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Now, Bai Yu had begun to take over Ten Direction World. She had a more mature charm, but when they talked, she still couldn't face Lin Yu with normal emotions. Lin Yu had left a stunning mark in Bai Yu's life that could never be erased. She wanted to muster the courage to confess her feelings to Lin Yu the next time they met. But when she saw the Jade Pure Goddess, she swallowed her words back. As the proud daughter of Ten Direction World, she felt inferior for the first time. The people around Lin Yu, whether in cultivation or appearance, were much stronger than her. She no longer had the courage to face Lin Yu now. In the end, while the Holy Landlord and Lin Yu were talking, she quietly left. Time passed. She didn't even have the courage to send them off. Lin Yu and the others used the falsified sky mark to return to the 12 universes. After so many years, the 12 universes. By now, they had completely shaken off the shadow of the war. And because of the resources of Universe 10, it became even more powerful. The great solar boundless Buddha and the others had also experienced significant improvements in their cultivation states. And Lin Yu of the burly Lin Yu, who was half human and half beast, had a very powerful aura. During the time when Lin Yu was away, he had been baptized by the blood essence of Sky Phoenix, Archaeos arose, and other great demons. At this time, he had almost broken through to the divine king realm. But until now, in the entire 12 universes, only Lin Yu and Lin Zhanyu had the battle strength of the ancestor realm. As for the Archaeosaros, the Dark Priest, and others, they were half-step divine kings. They were still some distance away from breaking through. After a discussion in the main hall, breaking through to the ancestor realm was no longer something that could be polished by time. It required great perseverance and courage. Lin Yu trusted the Vairocana Buddha and the others. Previously, the 12 universes were suppressed. Therefore, the Divine King realm powerhouses didn't appear. Now, the Divine King of the 12 universes had been established. The laws of heaven and earth changed. He believed that, with a little time, the great boundless Buddha Great had the highest hope of breaking through to the ancestor realm. Therefore, after discussing some things, Lin Yu specially passed down an ancient word for the great boundless Buddha Great to let him concentrate on comprehending. Immediately after, in the 12 universes, there was a huge storm. Lin Yu wanted to rely on his own strength to raise the realm of Archaeosaros and other half-step divine kings to the divine king realm. Only in this way, the 12 universes could be considered to have truly become stronger. In a secret place, Lin Yu set up many restrictions here. Archaeosaros, the sea god dragon, the dark priest, and Lin Yu and others were here. They were all half-step divine kings and were still some distance away from breaking through to the divine king realm. What Lin Yu wanted to do now was to rely on the ancient word he had mastered and the power of the divine king's order to raise the realm of these people. The ancient word and the divine king's order were both supreme divine objects, and their origins were unknown. Lin Yu was familiar with this. He knew that such a breakthrough would not leave behind any hidden dangers. The current Lin Yu was at the peak of the middle stage ancestor realm, and his strength was already the top existence in the 12 universes. With his strength as the backing, carrying out this matter would not leave too many hidden dangers. The few of them were all sitting cross-legged. Lin Yu carved a formation on the ground and began to draw on the power here. In the sky, supreme ancient words appeared. Everyone was shocked by this, because after they saw the ancient words, they were already very shocked. This was a power they had never seen before. The supreme aura began to surge in the secret place. It was as if the sky was opening. It made people's hearts constantly show surprise. Divine King Lin, it seems that these years you have obtained another supreme fortune. The Dark Priest's eyes were filled with gratification. He had lived from the era of the old Divine King until now. He had watched Lin Yu grow up step by step. He was both a subordinate and an elder. Seeing Lin Yu now lead the 12 universes step by step and step into a powerful realm, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The first ancient word that Lin Yu had comprehended was the main one. The other 8 ancient words were auxiliary. The aura of this place became extremely mysterious and profound. Lin Yu let the few of them calm down and began to focus on breaking through. The Archaeos arose, and the others began to emit a mysterious light. The aura of the Divine King realm began to emerge from their bodies. The power of the origin ancient word was too mysterious. At this time, the other 8 ancient words, under the guidance of the first ancient word, also began to emit a mysterious power. Everyone's body was enveloped in a layer of light. As time passed, they began to enter the last step of breaking through to the Divine King realm. Lin Yu controlled the ancient word. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had passed. The Archaeosaros was the first to break through. The power of the Divine King realm was surging in the secret place. Immediately after, the Dark Priest, the Sea God Dragon, and Lin Yuan also broke through one after another. Ha! Finally broke through. The Archaeosaros have finally reached the Divine King realm. The roar of the Archaeosaros spread throughout the 12 universes. Now, in the 12 universes, there were finally 4 more people who had ascended to the Divine King realm. Lin Yu smiled. After appearing and congratulating them, a few of them returned to Sky City. At this time, Lin Yu found that the pottery jar in his body was making a strange movement. Are there fragments of pottery jars in the 12 universes? Lin Yu looked at a certain place in the 12 universes. His eyes were bright. It seemed to be the Hongmeng continent that had been destroyed and was later repaired by Qin Ji and the others. Since there were fragments of pottery jars in the 12 universes, Lin Yu was not anxious. He knew that if he wanted to completely repair the pottery jars, there was still a very long way to go. He had now helped the Archaeosaurs and the others to break through, and now his realm was also at the peak of the middle stage of the Ancestor realm. It was time to think about the last step of the breakthrough. With his current realm, if the final black calamity really came, even if he held the pottery jars, it would be difficult to play the slightest role. Chapter 1233. After the few of them returned to the Sky Alliance, Lin Yu did not delay too much. Immediately after, he came to the rebuilt Hongmeng continent to carry out his final breakthrough. He came to the place where he had always been when he was reincarnated. After an unknown period of time, this place had become full of birds and flowers. This was deliberately done by Qin Ji so that this place would always maintain its original appearance. This time, Lin Yu did not bring anyone with him. He was alone. This was because there was no one in the 12 universes who could help him break through to the late-stage Ancestor realm. He looked at everything around him with emotion in his heart. He had left too many memories here that he could not forget for a long time. At the same time, he was also happy that the people he had met all had special feelings for him. Lin Yu sat cross-legged in the thatched house. The thoughts in his heart gradually settled down at this moment. After an unknown period of time, the Ancestor realm radiance on Lin Yu's body gradually radiated. He was ready to start the final breakthrough. The path of cultivation represented endless loneliness. Lin Yu had already understood this point in his 100,000 years of reincarnation. He did not have the slightest bit of fear. Now that he was the supreme being of the 12 universes, he needed to shoulder his responsibility. This continued until 3 years later. The aura on Lin Yu's body was still the same. The entire Hongmeng continent seemed to have sensed this aura. At this moment, the entire continent was shaking. However, the aura here had been concealed by Lin Yu, making everything here undetectable. Even everyone in the Sky Alliance did not know what was happening here. When he was in charge of the clay jar, Lin Yu had already reached the peak of the middle stage Ancestor realm. At this moment, he was only one step away. It was very simple. However, Lin Yu was thinking that his path would definitely not stop here. He needed to break through to a higher realm. Therefore, he needed to build a foundation step by step. He was not anxious to break through. He saw a few ancient words lingering in his sea of consciousness. He was constantly deducing. 1,000 years passed like this. Lin Yu's realm was like water flowing when conditions were right, breaking through to the late-stage Ancestor realm. With his current strength, apart from the experts who had yet to awaken in these 12 universes, there were no other experts. Among the godly kings of the 12 universes, he was a peak existence. Among the 12 universes, apart from Lin Yu and Lin Zhanyu, these two people already did not possess the combat strength of the Ancestor realm. Now, Lin Yu had to bear the burden. However, later on, the ancient gods of the other universes had been revived. His 12 universes would no longer have any right to speak. This was also the reason why Lin Yu had always wanted to become stronger. After reaching the Ancestor realm, Lin Yu's aura became even more restrained. As long as he did not show it, no one would be able to see through Lin Yu's true cultivation. Furthermore, what was even more surprising was that Lin Yu's body was already brimming with the radiance of an origin god. This kind of aura was faintly discernible, but it definitely could not be ignored. As Lin Yu placed his palm in front of himself, one could see that on his palm, there were worlds being born and destroyed. It looked very mysterious. If it was seen by others, they would definitely be shocked. The higher the realm, the greater the gap between them. Especially between the Ancestor realm and the original God realm, there was a natural chasm between them. At the original God realm, one had already comprehended the Tao law between heaven and earth and could evolve it to the point of being able to create a new world. But now, Lin Yu's realm was only at the late-stage ancestor realm. Now that he had encountered an opportunity, he had already grasped the Tao law of the original God realm. Therefore, the current him already had the preliminary Tao law and ability to create a world. As the aura on his hand became more and more blazing, in his understatement, the world in his hand turned into pure Tao law and sank into the Hongmeng continent. The Hongmeng continent was just being preliminarily established, although there were already living creatures living in it. But it was not until Lin Yu's method was injected that it was completely repaired. The Tao law here was gradually perfected. Many people were able to sense this aura. Some of the living creatures on the Hongmeng continent began to advance. It was because of Lin Yu. Many cultivators here sensed that someone had completely repaired the Hongmeng continent. It was even more powerful than the energy and matter of the Hongmeng continent before it was destroyed. Lin Yu looked at all of this indifferently. It was as if nothing in the world could affect him. After the breakthrough, Lin Yu did not stay here for too long. After completely repairing the Hongmeng continent, he disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he already had no idea where he was. So the location of the fragments of the pottery jar is here. Lin Yu looked at the endless sea. Amidst the surging waves, Lin Yu's heart stirred. This was the place where he last saw his father back then. At this moment, with Lin Yu's cultivation, even if the extreme evil source here was not completely removed, it would be difficult to completely stop him. As he waved his hand, the extreme evil source here was now melting like ice and snow. There was not the slightest trace of its existence. Lin Yu returned to the location of the island. He stood on the peak of the mountain. This was a place where he last stood side by side with his father. But now, everything had ceased to exist. A small fragment of the pottery jar broke through the island and came to Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. A gentle breeze blew past, blowing the corner of Lin Yu's clothes. But it was difficult to blow away Lin Yu's thoughts. Lin Yu had been standing here for a year. After a long time, Lin Yu left the island. Now, he was the divine king of the 12 universes. He wanted to see how the current 12 universes were developing. With his current realm, it was not difficult for him to use the power of his divine sense to explore the various locations of the 12 universes. However, the strength of a universe should not be evaluated by realm and cultivation alone. Lin Yu's figure disappeared again. He came to a place in the Hongmeng continent. This was a small city with a population of only tens of thousands. But after Lin Yu overthrew the six-winged divine king, after the restoration of Qin Ji and the others, this place was already thriving. Lin Yu came to a small restaurant. Only the grandfather and grandson were taking care of this place. Although the days were tough, they could barely survive. Usually, when the troops who went out to hunt monsters returned and sat down here, this was the happiest time for the grandfather and grandson. Seeing Lin Yu enter, the old man's attitude was very good, and he took care of him warmly. Although in the 100,000 years of reincarnation, Lin Yu had also experienced the various forms of life. But after reaching the late-stage ancestor realm, he came here with a different kind of enlightenment. "Little brother, what would you like to eat?" The old man wiped the table skillfully, even though it was already very clean. As he spoke, he poured tea. Chapter 1234. Lin Yu only ordered a few side dishes. After finding a secluded place, he started to drink wine. Lin Yu looked at everything in the city and sighed. He deliberately suppressed his cultivation to that of an ordinary person. Moreover, he suppressed it with the 9 ancient words and the clay pot. This was a kind of training. Lin Yu was about to break through to the ancestor realm, so he needed to understand the nature of the world. To create a world, he needed to have a deep understanding of the world. Lin Yu had seen through many things in the world during the 100,000 years of reincarnation. However, he had never understood it in detail. At this moment, Lin Yu looked at the center of a human city. The crowd was bustling with activity, and endless streams of horses and carriages could be seen. It was bustling and prosperous. Some people were discussing on the street. Today is the day that the Wan Yu sect is recruiting disciples. Let's go and take a look. Some people brought their young children to the center with ardent hope in their eyes. Lin Yu drank. Now, only Lin Yu's table was left in the entire store. The old man's grandson looked at his parents on the street with envy as they walked towards the center with their children. Old master, what happened in the human city? Lin Yu held a cup and asked curiously. Now his divine consciousness, combat body, and cultivation were all deliberately suppressed. It was difficult to sense the exact situation inside, so he asked. The central square is the time when a local sect is recruiting disciples. The old man looked ahead and subconsciously glanced at his grandson with his turbid eyes. At his grandson's age, he should have also entered the selection. However, for some reason, he did not go. It could be seen that the grandfather and grandson were both hopeful. Lin Yu did not understand the reason. After drinking this cup of wine, he slowly got up. He was ready to go and watch the show. But at this moment, a few cultivators slowly entered the store. Their eyes were filled with arrogance and domineeringness. They smashed the table that was blocking them into pieces. "Old man, serve us wine," he said with a hint of reprimand. When the old man saw the arrival of these people, his face turned pale. It seemed that this was not the first time. However, the old man's face only turned ugly for a short while before he quickly prepared wine and food and served them. It's time to pay this month's rent. The leader of the group was a horse-faced man with pockmarks. He looked at the dilapidated store without the slightest bit of pity. "This store is ours to begin with. Why should we pay you?" At this moment, the little boy's eyes were filled with anger as he questioned. "You've grown up." The horse-faced man knocked on the table. A chopstick flew out and headed straight for the little boy. "That person's children are all the same." The horse-faced man's lips had a mocking smile at this moment. The chopstick that he shot out was extremely fast and violent, as if it was meant to take the little boy's life. When the people on the street saw this scene, they all retreated, not wanting to get involved. The horse-faced man's attack. Seeing this, the old man turned pale with fright. He quickly went forward and used the towel in his hand and a mysterious technique to counteract the force. "Don't be angry, my lords," the old man said. When Lin Yu saw the old man's technique, he was also curious. Obviously, although the old man did not set foot on the path of cultivation, he still had some understanding of some martial techniques. Otherwise, he would not have been able to counteract this attack. When the horse-faced man saw that his technique had been neutralized, his face immediately darkened. An old man like him who was proficient in martial techniques would be a master in a mortal world. Although he was not as good as a cultivator, it was absolutely impossible for him to run a small restaurant. Perhaps there was some hidden story behind it. Who knows? Lin Yu did not leave. He only watched quietly from the side. "Are you grandfather and grandson looking to die?" The horse-faced man asked with a questioning look. It seemed that he would kill the grandfather and grandson on the spot if there was a disagreement. "My parents are already dead because of you, and now my grandfather is also in dire straits. Aren't you happy?" The little boy looked at the horse-faced man and the others. There was not the slightest bit of fear in his eyes. He forcibly pulled back the tears at the corner of his eyes. They had been suppressed for too long. Although the little boy was young, he knew everything. Now that he thought of his parents' death and how he and his grandfather had been bullied, he could no longer bear it and stood up at this moment. "You have some guts." Lin Yu nodded slightly. The horse-faced man was ready to attack at this moment. The old man quickly went forward and covered the little boy's mouth. There was a sad look in his eyes. He had experienced the white-haired man's death. Now, he did not want his grandson to die in the hands of these people. "It seems that you have a deep grudge. It seems that you can't be left alive." The horse-faced man was obviously waiting for this day. Now, he had a reason to kill the grandfather and grandson here. He thought about how his master's position in the sect had already soared. Even the elder who protected the two of them had nothing to say about it. Now, he could take this opportunity to completely remove the thorn in his master's heart. He stood up. The cultivation in his body directly shook the old man and made him step back repeatedly. He could not help but cough up blood. "Grandpa," the little boy said. The old man supported him with a worried look on his face. "Xiao Yi, I'm sorry. I've endured for so many years. I thought they would let you go and live as an ordinary person. It seems that they have always wanted to eliminate the roots." The old man's face was full of guilt. He continued, "Back then, I didn't protect your parents. Now, I can't do anything about you." The old man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He already knew what these people were thinking. He had always hoped that he could protect his grandson, even if he had to struggle at death's door. He needed to protect the only bloodline of his son and daughter-in-law. Even if he had to die, he was willing. But now, his only wish had become an extravagant hope. The old man picked up the kitchen knife on the chopping board. His turbid eyes gradually became fierce. "It's sad and lamentable. Escort leader, you used to be so glorious." His son and daughter-in-law were both core disciples of the sect, but they were persecuted. Now, he can't even protect his only bloodline. Someone sighed repeatedly, seeing that the old man was ready to fight for his life. The horse-faced man and the others had disdain written all over their faces. Not to mention that the old man was half dead. Even at his peak, a martial arts master in the mortal world would find it difficult to compete with a small cultivator. Now, everything was a struggle of a cornered beast. But most of the people on the street had heard the rumors about the old man's son. Now, no one dared to step forward. They did not want to provoke a core disciple of the sect. For them, such a person was a godlike existence. Killing them was as easy as crushing an ant. The kitchen knife in the old man's hand. The horse-faced man just casually flicked his finger and shot out a stream of light, but he was sent flying. The old man's arm bones were broken. The gap between them was self-evident. Chapter 12:35. At this moment, the horse-faced man noticed Lin Yu, who had been watching from the side. The horse-faced man came from a famous local sect, so he didn't want to be seen in public. Now that someone was watching calmly, he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. He immediately scolded, "What are you looking at? Get out of here." The man looked at Lin Yu with a vicious look in his eyes. It seemed that if Lin Yu said no, he would be killed on the spot. He would end up like the grandfather and grandson. Lin Yu looked at the horse-faced man and his grandson indifferently. The world operated according to its own rules. Lin Yu didn't want to get involved. However, the horse-faced man provoked him. Lin Yu's temperament was close to that of a god. Killing someone was as easy as flipping his hand for him. Even though he had purposefully suppressed his cultivation, body, and mind, he could still easily kill the horse-faced man with his comprehension of all the laws in the world. The horse-faced man had only just set foot on the path of cultivation. "Why aren't you leaving? Do you want to die?" The horse-faced man scolded again. Seeing that Lin Yu didn't move, he felt that his dignity had been seriously challenged. Instead of focusing on the two of them, he turned his attention to Lin Yu and launched an attack with his palm. This was a blow that would take Lin Yu's life. As long as he was caught, Lin Yu's throat would be broken and he would die. Everything happened too suddenly. In these people's perception, Lin Yu was just an ordinary person without any cultivation. Killing him was as easy as crushing an ant. Everyone's eyes were full of mockery. In the sect, they were restricted in every way. In the outside world, they were absolute powerhouses. Even the martial arts grandmasters in the mortal world were like weak children in their eyes. Not to mention a young man with a thin figure. "You should know the price of attacking me." Lin Yu looked at the horse-faced man who was rushing at him. There was no trace of panic on his face. He was still very calm. This man seems to have been scared out of his wits. Seeing this, the horse-faced man's companions all smiled. There was no pity in their eyes. "Ah, you're just an ant." The horse-faced man was not angry at Lin Yu's threat. Instead, he laughed. This was the first time he was provoked after leaving the sect. "Do you know that I'm now like a mosquito bite? It's easy to kill you." The horse-faced man was already close to Lin Yu. He was about to crush Lin Yu's neck. Everyone seemed to see the scene of blood splattering. Some people outside covered the eyes of their children, not wanting them to see such a bloody scene. Chi! The warm blood began to splatter in all directions. Everyone thought that the outcome had been decided, but when they opened their eyes, they saw an unexpected scene. Lin Yu's only. Then, he grabbed the man's neck with one hand. It could be seen that both of the horse-faced man's arms were broken. They fell powerlessly into a pool of blood. No one noticed how Lin Yu made his move. Only the old man's pupils contracted. He seemed to have seen Lin use martial arts that had almost reached perfection. But his move was too mysterious. Even if the old man sensed it, he did not see how he made his move. Lin Yu looked coldly at the horse-faced man, who was about to faint from the pain. "How dare you? You can't kill him." The horse-faced man's companions turned pale with fright at this moment. Lin Yu's means were too mysterious, almost to the point of being strange. It was beyond the scope of martial arts. It was almost Tao. Several people stepped forward at the same time, but they were afraid of taking action. They were worried that Lin Yu would use the horse-faced man as a hostage. It was just that these thoughts were all overthinking. Lin Yu looked indifferently at the horse-faced man. He exerted a little force in his palm. The sound of bones breaking could be heard clearly. The horse-faced man was completely dead. His body was casually thrown aside by Lin Yu. He clapped his hands to get rid of the bloodstains on them. Everything seemed so casual. It was as if killing a person was a very common thing for him. "How dare you?" Several people were stunned. When they came back to their senses, they were furious. Their bodies were overflowing with radiance. Apparently, they had all used their divine powers to kill Lin Yu. After all, the death of a disciple outside was not a small matter for their sect. And there was an order from above that they were not to attack mortals. This was an order from the current divine king. Now they disobeyed, which was a big taboo. If this spread to the ears of the sect, they would inevitably be held accountable. At this time, they all had the same idea. That was, they could not make a big deal out of this. They could only kill Lin Yu on the spot. Then, they would force all the blame on a mortal. Naturally, the excuse was very simple. A martial arts master of the mortal world attacked the old and weak. The horse-faced man and the others wanted to stop them, but the mortal used a strange method to persecute the horse-faced man. They now knew that there was something strange about Lin Yu. Therefore, they used their strongest moves to deal with him. They cooperated very well. At this time, someone completely sealed off the place. Including the grandfather and grandson, they were all imprisoned and could not break free. This place was shrouded in fog, making it difficult for the outside world to see. Lin Yu looked at the surrounding restrictions with a disdainful smile. "You're just doing something unnecessary by sealing this place. Thief, don't be arrogant. Return my senior brother's life." An ordinary-looking man shouted at this time. The shadow of a sword chi had already condensed in his hand. It stabbed towards Lin Yu. Looking at such a fierce attack, even the old man was in despair. At this time, he fiddled with the little boy to the side, and the chi and blood in his body condensed forward. He took a big stride forward and rushed in front of Lin Yu. The kitchen knife in his hand was already faintly blood-red under the reflection of his chi and blood. This was the old man forcibly increasing his chi and blood. This was a kind of secret method. The old man stood in front of Lin Yu with a determined face. "Little brother, everything happened because of me and my grandson. I really feel guilty that I got you involved. If you can escape, try your best to leave." The old man was not confident that he could block this attack. He was already prepared to die. Seeing this scene, the little boy shouted loudly, "Grandpa, no." The little boy also wanted to go forward and die with his grandfather. "You're quite bold." Lin Yu's body emitted a chi and blood. It was the same kind of secret method that the old man used. However, the degree of profoundness was even more profound. Lin Yu had traveled to every corner of the Hongmeng continent in the 100,000 years of reincarnation. Naturally, it was not strange that he had the original copy of this kind of secret method that was lost to them. The old man could not help but look sideways. At this time, Lin Yu had already stepped forward. His fingers curled and grabbed the shadow of the sword chi. With a gentle squeeze, the sword chi shattered. Everyone was incomparably shocked. With Lin Yu's current realm, It was naturally impossible for him to take on the divine power directly. He was very familiar with this kind of shallow divine power. When a man condensed it, he had already seen through its weakness. Now, a few inches below the sword hilt, it was completely broken. Before the few of them could be surprised, Lin Yu rushed out like an arrow, as if there was no one around. He killed one person in every 10 steps. Blood splattered continuously. Not long after, the entire store was covered in blood. One could see broken limbs everywhere. It was very bloody. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.